Hello everyone. I am the storyteller. Tonight, I'll tell you a story that claws at the walls of memory, like nails dragging along stone too old to crumble. A tale that isn't passed down in fairy tale cadence, but buried in ledgers, in dust-choked archives, and in the breath of men who swore never to speak it again. Most who hear whispers of the Ohio State Reformatory dismiss them as ghost tour nonsense, campfire fuel for out-of-towners. But I know better. Because I walked those halls when the stone was breathing. It began not with blood, but with need. A need for work, for shelter, for something steady in a world that punishes weakness. And when I stepped through those iron gates, I thought I was just clocking in. I didn't yet understand that the place kept its own hours, and that some rules weren't written for men at all. So relax. Lean into the hush that settles when the wind dies. Listen to the wait in the silence between heartbeats. And if you stay with me long enough, you'll learn what waits when the prison walls remember your name. Whatever you do, don't answer when it calls it back. After my wife left, I lost more than the house. I lost my sense of balance. The divorce hit me sideways: lawyers, rent, splitting everything I'd worked for. I couldn't keep up with the mortgage, and by January I was sleeping in my truck some nights, patching drywall for cash, just scraping. I needed something steady, fast. So when I saw the posting online: night security, Ohio State Reformatory, $30 per hour, I didn't ask questions. It didn't matter that the pay was too good for what looked like babysitting an empty tourist attraction. It didn't matter that the application only asked for my name, phone number, and whether I could work nights. No background check. No references. They hired me over the phone. Told me to report to the reformatory by 6 p.m., ask for Mr. Kincaid, who would provide the guidelines I'd need to follow. Not rules. Guidelines. The prison looked wrong against the February sky. Stone towers clawing upward, snow crusted over the windowsills. Most of Mansfield was quiet, flat Midwestern streets, but this place, it jutted out like something dug up, not built. I parked near the east gate. My breath smoked out in front of me, the wind pushing it sideways. The front doors were chained, but a side entry was propped with a wooden block. Inside, the air stank like wet limestone and old paper. The lights hummed fluorescent tubes that flickered like they were powered by something meaner than electricity. That's when I met Kincaid. He was waiting in a cramped office near the intake hall. Late 50s, wiry frame, gray hair buzzed down. His uniform wasn't police, not correctional officer either. Plain navy jacket, flashlight on his belt, clipboard in his hand. "You must be Evan," he said. His voice rasped like someone who smoked more than he talked. "Sit down. We'll go through the guidelines." I thought it'd be normal stuff: lock checks, visitor protocols, camera sweeps. Instead, he slid a yellow legal pad across the desk. 10 lines written in neat block letters. The guidelines, first draft. 1. Do not patrol C block between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m. Stay in the East Wing office with the door shut. 2. If you hear chains dragging behind you, do not turn around. Continue walking until the sound stops. 3. Do not answer the intercom if it buzzes after midnight. 4. If you see an inmate in uniform, do not engage. They are not living. 5. Count the cells at 3 a.m. sharp. You must reach the same total as written in the logbook. If the number differs, correct it immediately. 6. Do not look into the mirror in the warden's quarters. Cover it if uncovered. 7. If you hear hissing in the chapel, leave a cigarette on the pew and exit. Do not look toward the altar. 8. The basement door must remain padlocked. If it is open, relock it without looking inside. 9. If you hear your own voice calling you from another hall, do not respond. Return to the office. 10. Under no circumstances should you enter the sub-basement. That space is not yours. I laughed. Couldn't help it. It sounded like some haunted house bullshit they told seasonal workers to keep them from sneaking around. Kincaid didn't laugh. He just tapped the list with a nicotine-stained finger. You follow these. To the letter. This place is older than it looks. Built on older still. You'll understand. I asked what happened if I broke one. His eyes twitched toward the barred windows. You won't live long enough to make the same mistake twice. First night. The shift started simple. The prison groaned like an old ship, wind cutting through the corridors. My boots echoed. Dust clung to every surface. At midnight, the intercom in the east wing buzzed. Rule 3. Don't answer. I sat in the office, staring at the black receiver. The buzz came again, long and harsh. My hand twitched. Curiosity itched like a rash. What if it was Kincaid testing me? What if it was nothing? I didn't answer. Eventually the buzzing stopped. When I stepped out at 12:15, the hallway smelled faintly of sulfur. 2 a.m. I was halfway down the West Wing stairs when I remembered Rule 1. No C-block between 2 o'clock and 2:30. My watch read 1:58. I froze. The staircase opened directly into C-block, rows of cells stacked like iron honeycombs. I could see straight into the catwalk. Chains clattered. Not loud, faint, deliberate, like someone dragging a single link. The air tightened in my chest. I backed up the stairs, slow. My flashlight beam jittered across concrete. By the time I reached the landing, the sound had stopped. At 3 o'clock sharp, I started the cell count. The logbook said 312. I walked each tier, marking cells. My footsteps echoed wrong, like the hall was longer than it was. When I finished, the count came to 313. My stomach dropped. Rule 5. If the number differs, correct it immediately. I ran back through the tiers, double-checking. This time, I counted 312. I don't know how. I don't know what I missed. But I swear on the second run, one of the doors was open that hadn't been before. A shape inside, standing still. I didn't look. I just kept moving, marking the numbers, repeating them under my breath until they matched. 312. 312. 312. By 4 o'clock, the silence was worse than noise. I made rounds past the chapel, doors chained open. Inside, something hissed. Long, slow, almost like breath forced through teeth. Rule 7. Leave a cigarette on the pew. I dug one from the pack in my pocket. I don't even smoke, but Kincaid insisted I bring a carton. I set it down on the first bench and walked out fast, not looking back. The hissing stopped. But when I glanced over my shoulder, just once, the air above the altar rippled. Like heat over asphalt. When the sun bled through the windows, Kincaid was waiting by the exit. You followed them? He asked. I nodded. Told him about the chains, the count, the hissing. He didn't look surprised. Just nodded slow. Good. The draken stirs more in winter. The cold makes it restless. You'll see more before long. Draken? I asked. His face stayed stone. Not dragon. Not demon. Guardian. Bound long before this place was built. The warden made his deal, and we keep the terms. That's what the guidelines are. They're not rules. They're bargains. That was my first night. I walked in thinking I was guarding an empty prison. I walked out knowing I was keeping something in. If you ever find yourself in the Ohio State Reformatory at night, and you hear chains behind you, don't turn around. The second shift. I came back the next night with heavier boots and a heavier head. All day I told myself the first shift hadn't been what I thought. Old pipes groaned, shadows messed with my count, maybe I was too wired on gas station coffee. But when the reformatory loomed against the sunset, its stone teeth catching fire-red light, the excuses burned up. The place was waiting for me. Kincaid was already there. Same office, same clipboard. He didn't ask me how I slept. Just shoved the keys across the desk. "You remember the guidelines," he said. Not a question. I nodded. My throat was dry. I spent the first hours walking the east wing, dragging my light across rusted bars. Cold crawled up from the floor. My breath smoked in the beam. At midnight, the intercom buzzed again. Rule 3. Don't answer. The first night, it had been just noise. This time, there was a voice under it. Muffled. Choking. A man begging. "Please. Please open the door. He's in here. He's coming." The line cut to static. I sat frozen, nails digging into the desk, sweat slick on my back. Every instinct told me to pick up the receiver. Even fake voices don't beg like that. I didn't. At 12:15, the buzzing stopped. And the office smelled faintly of ash. Around 1, I pushed into the north hall, past a storage room half collapsed with mold. Something was off with the wall behind the lockers, the plaster didn't match. I pressed against it. Hollow. A kick to the base cracked it. A piece crumbled out, coughing dust. Inside was a gap, not a full crawl space, just a cavity. And shoved inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a notebook. The leather was soft with age. Corners eaten by mice. Pages cramped with handwriting, tight and slanted. The first line read, "If you're reading this, you already know the rules. You've already heard the chains." The writer didn't sign his name. He just called himself, The Last Watch. Some entries were short. C block, 207. Chains behind me. Didn't turn. Cold on the back of my neck, like breath. My flashlight cut out. Came back on when the sound stopped. Others were long, rambling, desperate. It doesn't just stay in the basement. It moves through the stone. I felt it under me, pressing through the floor. The chapel isn't holy anymore. That hiss is the sound it makes when it wants to be fed. And one entry chilled me straight through. Rule 10 is not a suggestion. I looked once. I thought I could stand at the sub-basement door and just peek. It's not a room. It's not space the way we know space. The bars down there bend like reeds. Something coils in the dark. I think it saw me. I can't stop shaking. Don't go. Don't. 2 a.m. again. As I turned the page, my watch ticked toward 2 o'clock. C block again. My stomach soured. I hadn't planned to go near it, but something in me wanted proof, wanted to know if the journal wasn't just paranoia. I crept to the threshold. The tier stretched long and black, bars catching slivers of moonlight. 2:01. The chain started. Behind me. Every hair on my body rose. The journal's words burned in my head, "Don't turn. Don't." I walked forward, stiff-legged, keeping my eyes straight. But the sound wasn't just chains this time. It was scales. Dry scales sliding over stone. The noise followed until I reached the stairwell. Then silence. By 2:40, I was shaking so bad I needed to sit. I ducked into the warden's quarters, a long room with dust-furred furniture and curtains that stank of mildew. The mirror was uncovered. Tall, gilt frame. The glass warped with age. Rule 6 said to cover it. I stepped closer. My flashlight beam caught my own reflection, pale, sweat-drenched, eyes too wide. Then my reflection blinked out of rhythm. I dropped the beam, grabbed the sheet from the bed, and threw it over the mirror. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly tore the fabric. Under the cloth, something tapped. Slow. Patient. I got the hell out. 3 a.m. cell count. Logbook, 312. First walk through, 312. Good. Second walk through, to double check, 312 again. Relief washed me hollow. But as I turned, I saw one of the doors open. The same as the journal described. And in the cell, something moved. Not a man. Not quite. Long body, coiled, muscles sliding under scaled hide. A mouth too wide, teeth flashing in the dark. I forced myself not to stop. Just kept walking, counting under my breath. 312. 312. 312. By 6 o'clock, I was shaking. Kincaid was at the office again. "You saw it," he said flat, not a question. I shoved the journal at him. "Who wrote this?" He didn't take it. Just glanced at the cover, then away. "Doesn't matter." He didn't last. "You will if you keep your head down." "What is it?" I demanded. "What's in this place?" For the first time, Kincaid looked afraid. "The Draken. It was bound here before the prison. The warden thought he could harness it, chain it to his order. But guardians don't forget their first orders. And they don't forgive." He looked past me, toward the barred window. "Keep following the guidelines, Evan. Or you'll end up in the wall like the last one." That was my second night. I don't know if the Draken is a beast, a god, or something older. But I know this, the prison isn't abandoned. It's occupied. Guarded. And every shift feels like the walls are leaning closer, listening. If you ever work here, never, ever look into the warden's mirror. Third night, I wasn't alone. When I showed up, Kincaid introduced me to another guard, Ryan Calder. Younger than me, maybe late 20s. Ball cap pulled low, hoodie under his jacket, chewing gum like it was keeping him alive. "Don't need to babysit the place solo," Kincaid said. "Ryan here's been on and off a year. Knows the ropes." Ryan winked at me. "Don't sweat the spook stories. Just Kincaid keeping us in line. This place is a pile of rocks. Nothing more." He tapped the guideline sheet pinned to the office wall. "Half this stuff. Urban legend bullshit." I wanted to argue, wanted to say I'd seen things, but the word stuck. Ryan's smirk made me swallow it down. Midnight. We split the shift. I took East Wing, he took West. At midnight, the intercom buzzed again. This time it wasn't begging. It was my voice. "Evan. Pick up. Please. You need to pick up." Every nerve screamed. Rule 3. Don't answer. I sat frozen. The voice repeated, identical each time, like a broken tape. I didn't touch it. When Ryan came back around 12:30, he laughed. "Intercom gets into your head, huh? Trick wiring. I picked mine up last week, just static." He grinned. Nothing happened. But his hands shook when he lit a cigarette. At 1:45, Ryan wanted to show me something. "Come on," he said. "Sub-basement. You can hear the pipes rattling like ghosts. That's where Kincaid gets half his scare stories." Rule 10 burned in my skull. "No," I said. "That's not ours." He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, man. Don't drink the Kool-Aid." Before I could stop him, he'd unlocked the padlock on the basement stairwell. The door moaned open. Cold rolled out, not draft cold, not winter cold. Something older. Like stone pulled from the earth. Ryan clicked on his flashlight and grinned back at me. "See? Nothing. But the beam didn't reach the bottom. It bent. The air shimmered, warped. And something hissed from below. Ryan laughed too loud, slammed the door shut, locked it. See? Just pipes. But his face was pale as paper. 2 a.m. When 2 o'clock hit, I was in East Wing. Ryan was in C Block. Rule 1, stay out of C Block between 2 o'clock and 2:30. At 2:05, his radio crackled. Static, then his voice, sharp, Evan. You hear that? Chains rattled through the receiver. I shouted back, get out of there. Rule 1. But he just laughed, radio distorted. Man, it's just sound. Look. The channel exploded with a scream. Metal clanging. Then nothing. I ran to the landing. The block was empty. His flashlight lay on the catwalk, beam rolling against the bars. No Ryan. At 3 o'clock, my hands shook too hard to hold the logbook steady. 312. I forced myself through the tears, whispering the numbers. Halfway, I saw him. Ryan. Standing in one of the open cells. Except his face wasn't right. His jaw hung too low, eyes stretched wide, skin rippling like scales beneath. His voice came out wrong like stone grating over stone. Evan, it rasped. Don't miss a number. I kept walking. Counting. 312. 312. 312. When I looked back, the cell was empty. At shift's end, I stumbled back to the office. Kincaid was waiting. Where's Calder? He asked. I couldn't answer. Just shoved the logbook across the desk. Kincaid skimmed the numbers, nodded once. You kept it balanced. What happened to him? My voice cracked. He lit a cigarette, dragged hard. Rule breakers don't last. Sometimes they go fast. Sometimes slower. He met my eyes. You follow the guidelines, Evan. You'll live. You break them, you'll become part of the prison. I thought of Ryan's stretched face, his voice like scales on stone. And I understood. That was the night I learned the rules aren't just for survival. They're for containment. The Draken doesn't just punish, it absorbs. Anyone who breaks the balance becomes part of the prison's body. If you're ever in C Block after 2 o'clock and you hear chains, don't follow them. Don't look for who's dragging them. Because it won't be a man anymore. The fourth night began with a smell. Not cigarettes, not mildew, not rot. Something harsher. Charred. Like old incense burned too long. The Reformatory carried it through every corridor. No matter where I went, the air tasted scorched. Kincaid noticed too. When I walked into the office, he was already flicking ashes into an overfull tray. He didn't look at me. Just muttered. Means it's stirring. Keep your head. Back in the guard quarters, I opened the notebook again. I'd missed entries once tucked near the back. One passage made my throat close. I think it was here before the prison. Before Mansfield. The old farmers talked about a hill where nothing grew. Where animals wouldn't graze. The Shawnee told stories about a serpent in the earth coiled beneath, waiting. They called it a guardian. Said you could bind it with chains, but never kill it. Another, written in a frantic hand. The rules aren't warnings. They're offerings. At midnight, don't answer because it's listening. At 2, don't turn because it wants your eyes. At 3, don't miscount because the number keeps it from rising. Every line is a prayer. Every step is part of the chain. I shut the journal fast, but the words burned in my head. Not warnings. Prayers. 1:30 a.m. The Reformatory groaned harder than usual, like the walls were settling. Except the sound wasn't from above or below. It came from inside the stone itself. I pressed my ear to a pillar in east wing. The granite vibrated faintly, like something vast was breathing beneath it. Chains rattled not behind me this time, but all around. Through the walls, the floor, the bars. When I pulled back, the pillar was warm. At 2:10, I skirted the C-block threshold, same as always. Chains. Hissing. The journal's warnings in my head. But this time, I felt it. Something behind me. Not breath, not air. Just weight. Pressure. Like a mountain had leaned down and put its eye to the back of my skull. My legs locked. My lungs froze. Every instinct screamed to turn, just once, to see what had its attention fixed on me. I didn't. I forced myself forward, nails gouging my palms. The pressure followed me down the hall, pressing. Then it lifted. And from somewhere in the dark came a laugh. Deep, echoing, inhuman. 3 a.m. When I counted the cells, my voice shook. 312. 312. 312. The third tier felt wrong. Too long. Like the corridor had stretched a few extra yards. When I finished, the logbook showed something impossible. 313. I froze. Flipped back. Counted again. Every time 313. But the logbook changed it back to 312. The ink rewrote itself, the digits curling, correcting. Like something bigger than me refused to let the number break. Around 4 o'clock, I passed the chapel. The door was cracked. Inside, candles burned fresh, not decades old. Their smoke curled like serpents toward the ceiling. A man sat in the front pew. Thin. Long coat. Hat shadowing his face. When he spoke, the words rattled. You follow the rules better than most. I stepped back. Who are you? He didn't turn. Just kept staring at the altar. I kept them once. Long before you. And when he finally faced me, his eyes weren't human. They were slit-pupilled, gleaming like molten bronze. I stumbled, flashlight shaking. But when the beam hit the pew again, it was empty. Candles snuffed in a single breath. When the sun finally scraped the horizon, I sat in the office, trembling. Kincaid studied me like a doctor with a patient. You feel it now, he said. The weight. The gaze. I nodded, throat tight. It doesn't test you for fun. It tests you to see if you'll break. If you're weak, it takes you. If you're strong, it keeps you. Keeps me? I asked. He didn't answer. Just handed me a fresh logbook. That was the night I realized the Reformatory isn't haunted. It's alive. The Draken isn't just chained in its basement. It is the walls. The floors. The bars. And it's watching me closer every night. If you ever feel a gaze press into the back of your head in that place, don't turn. Don't acknowledge it. Because if you lock eyes with it, even once you'll never look away again. My fifth night, the Reformatory didn't wait. The first hour, walls cracked. Sharp, brittle snaps echoing down the corridors. Dust drifted from ceilings, fine and white like bone ash. Every shift so far, the prison felt old, worn, quiet. Tonight it felt restless. Like something inside was stretching against its chains. I opened the notebook again in the guard quarters, desperate for grounding. A section I hadn't noticed before was written in different ink, darker, pressed hard into the page. The Draken is older than gods. The Greeks called it guardian, but it was never theirs. They only bound it, carried its hunger west with them. The masons who built the reformatory laid stone over its coil. Every bar, every beam is part of the chain. Another entry bled into the margins. When the stone breaks, the chain loosens. When the chain loosens, the gaze becomes teeth. If you see scales in the wall, pray you can look away. 1 a.m. In West Wing, I found scales. Not lizard, not snake. Bigger. Black-green, glimmering faintly even in the dark. They jutted from the mortar, pushing through stone like weeds through cracked pavement. When I touched one with my flashlight beam, it shivered. And the wall pulsed like flesh. I backed away, whispering the rules under my breath, each one like a prayer. 2 a.m. I avoided C block, as always. Stayed in East Wing. But at 2:10, I heard chains anyway. Not behind me. Not around me. From inside the floor. They rattled through the concrete, shaking dust loose, making my boots vibrate. My vision swam, ears ringing. Then a voice whispered up through the cracks. Count carefully, Evan. Balance matters. 3 a.m. the count. I carried the logbook with both hands, knuckles white. 312. 312. 312. But at cell 217, I stopped cold. Ryan was inside. He leaned against the bars, grinning, hat pulled low. But his grin was wrong, too wide, teeth too sharp. His skin shimmered faintly, like scales beneath. You missed me, he rasped. I kept counting, forcing my voice steady. 218, 219, 220. Ryan's grin spread further. His voice grated like chains. You can't keep balance forever. When I passed the end of the block, he was gone. The logbook read 312. Perfect. But my skin crawled where his eyes had touched me. 4 a.m. the breach. South Hall. The oldest part of the prison. A crack split the wall from floor to ceiling, wide enough to slip my hand in. Inside, darkness breathed. Something scaled brushed the edge, scraping stone. The crack widened with each exhale, dust raining down. I pressed the guideline sheet flat in my mind, clung to Rule 10. Don't descend. Don't give it space. I staggered back, whispering, not mine. Not mine. The wall pulsed once, then went still. But I knew it wasn't fixed. Just waiting. At 5 o'clock, I checked the chapel. Candles burned again. Dozens this time. Their wax ran like blood, pooling black on the floor. The pews were full. Figures sat shoulder to shoulder, all in prison grays, heads bowed. None moved. When I swung the light across them, their faces were scaled. Some had no faces at all, just smooth stone where mouths should be. And in the front pew, Ryan sat, smiling. He whispered without opening his mouth. Keep counting, Evan. You're part of it now. I shut the door and didn't open it again. At 6 o'clock, Kincaid was waiting in the office. Same smoke, same tired eyes. I told him about Ryan. About the crack in the wall. About the chapel. He just nodded. It's testing you harder now. That means it knows your name. My name? My voice shook. Once it learns who you are, you're not just passing through anymore. You're written in. Part of the balance. You can't walk away after that. He tapped the guideline sheet with a yellowed nail. Follow these. Or you'll join the others. That was the night the stone broke. The Draken isn't hidden anymore. It's pushing through, showing pieces of itself. And Ryan or whatever's left of him keeps watching from the cells, the chapel, the cracks. If you ever see scales in the stone, don't touch them. Don't even look too long. Because if the Draken notices you noticing, it'll never let go. The sixth night started with silence. No rattling pipes, no shifting shadows. Just a silence so heavy it pressed against my eardrums. Then a slow groan from the walls, like the whole building was breathing. When I reached South Hall, the crack from the night before had grown. Fist wide now, jagged all the way up to the ceiling. Dust coated the floor like snow. Something deep inside shifted, scales scraping stone. In the guard quarters, I went back to the journal. The next passage was longer, sprawling across 2 pages. The Greeks bound their monsters with stone. Walls became prisons, prisons became seals. The Draken of Colchis was never slain. It was carried, piece by piece, across sea and soil. Mason to mason, oath to oath, hidden beneath places of punishment. Ohio was no accident. The immigrants knew the stones here sang with the same weight as their homeland. Another note, smaller. Every chain has a flaw. This one is time. When the walls erode, the coil unravels. 1:30 a.m. vision at the wall. I went back to South Hall against every instinct. The crack hissed like breath. Against my better judgment, I pressed my hand flat against the stone. My vision dropped out. Suddenly I was somewhere else, an open plain, ancient and burning. A serpent larger than mountains coiled around a golden tree. Its eyes were suns, its scales shifting like storm clouds. Men with chisels hacked at stone, chanting. Their words weren't English, but I understood: bind, chain, seal. The serpent screamed. Chains of stone lashed across its body, dragging it underground. When I blinked, I was back in South Hall. My palm bled from the stone. The crack was wider. 2 a.m. the first coil. From West Wing came a noise like stone breaking. When I got there, a section of wall had collapsed into rubble. And from the rubble something emerged. Not all of it. Just a curve. A coil. Black-green scales the size of plates, muscle rippling beneath. It pressed against the broken space like it was testing how far it could stretch. The air reeked of blood and earth. I froze. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. The coil slid back into the wall, slow as an ocean tide. 3 a.m. Ryan again. I counted. My voice trembled, but I made it through. 312 exactly. But at cell 301, Ryan leaned out again. His eyes weren't human anymore, vertical pupils, glowing faint green. His voice rasped like stone dragging chains. You see it now, he whispered. The coil beneath. It knows your name. I forced myself to keep counting. 302, 303. Ryan followed along the bars, grin never fading. You're already part of it, Evan. Balance won't save you forever. 4 a.m. Kincaid's revelation. I found Kincaid in the office earlier than usual, smoke curling through the stale air. You saw it, didn't you? He said. No small talk. Just straight to it. I nodded. He took a long drag, exhaled. I've seen coils too. Back in '89. They don't forget who sees them. Once you've looked, it looks back. And it doesn't stop. I asked him what happens if the seal breaks. His eyes watered from smoke, or maybe something else. Then the prison isn't a prison anymore. It's just a hole. And holes go deep. Deeper than you want to imagine. 5 a.m. The chapel burns. When I checked the chapel, the candles weren't there. Instead, the walls themselves glowed faint red, cracked spiderwebbing across the plaster. Smoke rose from the altar. The figures in the pews had burned away, leaving only outlines in ash. At the front, Ryan stood again. His grin was wider, impossibly wide. His voice slid straight into my head. The coil is waking. And you're standing on its back. I stumbled out, throat raw from smoke that wasn't really there. As light broke through the high barred windows, the prison stilled. The crack in South Hall remained. The rubble in West Wing didn't vanish. For the first time, the changes didn't reset with the morning. The Draken wasn't retreating anymore. It was breaking through. The Reformatory isn't just haunted. It isn't just cursed. It was built to hold something ancient, something the Greeks couldn't kill. Something carried across oceans and buried under stone and iron. The Draken isn't staying quiet anymore. The chain is breaking. And I don't think the rules will be enough much longer. I should have gone home and slept. Instead, I drove into Mansfield. Straight to the library. Construction records on microfilm 1880s to 1910s. Dry documents, legal reports, bills of material. Until one ledger caught me. Stonework costs, 1886. Beside the numbers, someone had scribbled strange notes in the margins. Not in English. Sharp, curling letters that burned in my head when I stared too long. And a phrase in English, repeated 3 times. Keep the coil beneath. When I got to the prison that night, Kincaid was already there. Smoky haze clinging to him like always. You went digging, didn't you? He said flat. I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. Records won't help you. They'll only make it hungrier. Once you start saying its name, it leans closer. That's how it works. What name? I asked. He just gave me a long look. You'll know it when it speaks back. 12:30 a.m. Stone shatters. South Hall. The crack had doubled again, rubble spread across the floor. And pressed against the broken wall a face. Not fully formed, but the suggestion of one. Scales, ridges, a single vast golden eye that slit open and fixed on me. When it exhaled, the dust rose like smoke. I froze. The guideline sheet screamed in my head, don't speak, don't descend, don't acknowledge. So I shut my eyes, forced myself to count under my breath. When I opened them again, the face had slid back into the stone. But the crack was wider. 1:30 a.m. Ryan speaks. I heard footsteps in East Wing. Heavy, dragging. Ryan stepped into the hall. No bars this time. Just walking free, boots echoing on the stone. Half his skin was scaled now, shimmering black-green. His voice wasn't just his anymore, it carried something deeper, layered, a rumble beneath. You've seen its eye. You're marked. You think the rules will save you? They only delay. I raised the logbook like a shield. 312. He grinned. Numbers don't bind it anymore. The chains are rust. You'll see. Then he turned, walked into the wall, and vanished. 3 a.m. The breath. In West Wing, the air thickened. Heavy, humid, like standing in a furnace. Then breath. Hot and wet, rolling through the corridor, smelling of iron and ash. It came from everywhere at once, a tide of heat pressing me against the bars. I shut my eyes, whispered the rules, held my ground. The breath slowed. Faded. But my shirt clung to my back with sweat, and my skin still burned hours later. 4:30 a.m. Kincaid breaks. I found Kincaid in the office, staring at his trembling hands. You saw it too, didn't you? I asked. He gave a bitter laugh. You think you're the first? My brother worked this post before me. Broke the count one night. It took him piece by piece. I stayed, because if I leave, it follows. Better one man chained here than letting it wander free. I asked why the prison hadn't collapsed already. Because we keep the balance, he rasped. But cracks spread. Nothing lasts forever. Candles. Always candles. But this time they burned black. The smoke rose and coiled into the rafters, twisting into serpentine shapes. And in the front pew, Ryan again. His grin splitting his face, voice crawling straight into my skull. It's waking, Evan. Soon it won't need the walls. Soon you'll see all of it. For the second night in a row, the prison didn't reset. The rubble stayed. The crack stayed. And when I looked back as I left the gates, I swore the walls themselves shifted, bulging outward, as though something inside pressed harder every hour. I've seen its eye now. Golden, endless, slit like a blade. The Draken isn't staying quiet. The rules aren't holding. And the prison walls aren't just history. They're a seal. And seals break. They sent me help. Name was Harris. Fresh out of college, wore his uniform like it was a costume. Laughed too loud, gripped too loose. The kind of guy who thought rules were for other people. He showed up yawning, sipping a soda. Man, this place is creepy. They really make you walk the blocks all night. Stick to the sheet, I told him, handing him a copy of the guidelines. He laughed, crumpled it, shoved it in his pocket. Superstitious crap. What's the worst that happens? Ghost jumps out and goes boo. My stomach dropped. 12:30 a.m. the count. I warned him. Told him the count had to be exact. But Harris sauntered down the row, skipping numbers, whistling tunelessly. Ain't nobody in here. What am I counting? When he reached the end, I checked the logbook. 309. My throat went dry. You missed 3, I said. He shrugged. So. Nothing happened. Then the chains rattled. The air went heavy, thick like syrup. Harris blinked, coughed. The floor beneath him cracked. From the gap, scales slid up black-green, shimmering, muscles flexing. Before he could scream, the coil wrapped his legs, dragging him down. His laugh turned to a shriek, high and ragged, echoing off stone. I lunged forward, but the rules screamed in my skull, do not intervene when the count is broken. Balance must be restored. Harris's hands clawed at the air, nails ripping. His eyes locked on mine, wide, begging. Then the coil crushed him. Bones snapped like twigs. Blood sprayed across the bars. One more pull and he was gone. Swallowed by the floor. The crack sealed behind him like it had never opened. From the shadows of C Block, Ryan clapped slowly. His grin split wider than ever, voice layered with the Draken's rumble. Balance paid. Debt collected. The coil keeps its order. I staggered back, bile in my throat. Ryan leaned against the bars, eyes glowing faint. You see now. It doesn't just punish. It consumes. Always has, always will. I forced the logbook open with shaking hands. 312, the number fixed itself. Ryan chuckled. For now. 2:30 a.m. Kincaid breaks. In the office, Kincaid sat slumped, cigarette burned down to ash. You saw it, he said without looking at me. Harris. He's gone. Don't say his name. Names make it stronger. His voice cracked. You think you're different? You think you'll last longer? None of us do. We just keep it fed until it notices someone else. I clenched my fists. There has to be a way to stop it. Kincaid laughed, bitter and hollow. Stop it? Boy, it's older than gods. We're ants on its skin. 3 a.m. the eye again. South Hall. The crack was wider. The golden eye filled the space, pupil narrowing to a blade. It pulsed once, and I swore the air itself bent inward, pulling at me. I clung to the railing, whispering the rules, forcing myself not to move closer. The eye blinked slow, deliberate. A voice crawled into my skull, deeper than Ryan's, heavier than stone. Evan. It knew my name. 5 a.m. aftermath. The chapel was empty this time. No candles. No figures. Just silence. But Ryan's voice still lingered in my head, echoing with the Draken's. You kept the count. You obeyed. But obedience won't save you forever. The bloodstain where Harris died didn't vanish. It stayed dark on the stone, a reminder. For the third night in a row, the prison didn't reset. The seal is crumbling faster now. You can follow every rule, whisper them like prayers, cling to them like life preservers. But if someone else breaks them, the Draken takes what it's owed. Harris learned that. And now I know for sure, the rules aren't for safety. They're for feeding. Mansfield wasn't right. I drove downtown for coffee. People walked stiff, eyes darting at shadows like they were being followed. On the library steps, a woman clutched a rosary so hard her knuckles bled. Even animals knew. A stray dog whined at the Reformatory silhouette and bolted, tail between its legs. At the counter, the barista whispered, "Do you hear it at night? From the prison?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. When I clocked in, Kincaid looked older. His face seemed to sag in ways it hadn't yesterday. "You ever wonder why you lose track of days?" he asked. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He tapped the logbook. "I came here in '89. By my count, that was 3 years ago." I stared. "That was 36 years ago." His cigarette shook between his fingers. "Time doesn't run straight here. The coil twists it. I'm not supposed to still be alive." 12 a.m. The breathing walls. The prison didn't just creak tonight. It inhaled. The stone shifted, swelled, ribs of mortar groaning. Dust fell like skin flakes. When it exhaled, the torches guttered out one by one. My own breath synced with it before I could stop myself. Every inhale, every exhale, I matched the building. The Reformatory was breathing through me. 1:30 a.m. Ryan returns. I found Ryan in South Hall. But he wasn't behind the bars anymore. He was fused with them, half his chest melting into iron, half his face scaled and glistening. His grin was shredded, teeth black, gums bleeding. "Do you feel it, Evan?" His voice rattled the stone. The lungs of the coil. Breathing. Feeding. I backed away. He pressed harder into the bars, flesh tearing, scale gleaming. "It wants you. You keep the balance. But balance breaks. And when it does..." He trailed off, eyes glowing, grin twitching. "It feasts." 2:45 a.m. The voice. I didn't need Ryan to hear it anymore. The voice slid straight into the stone, vibrating every wall. "Evan." The sound rattled my teeth. My ears bled. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, but the voice didn't stop. It wasn't sound anymore, it was inside me, a vibration in my bones. "Come closer." I crawled away instead. The walls pulsed. 3:30 a.m. The head. South Hall again. Always South Hall. The crack ripped open. Not a fracture anymore, a wound. From it pushed a jaw. Massive. Black-green scales tearing free of stone. Fangs as long as my arms, dripping something that hissed when it hit the floor. The breath poured out, hot and metallic, like standing inside a furnace full of blood. The eye opened again. Bigger. Focused. Alive. And this time it didn't slide back. 5 a.m. The chapel collapses. The chapel walls buckled. Candles fell. Pew wood cracked. For the first time, the figures weren't silhouettes. They were bodies. Burnt, skin sloughing, mouths open in silent screams. Ryan stood at the pulpit, half human, half scale, voice a sermon. The coil wakes. The debt grows. And you are its chosen witness. I stumbled out, throat raw from smoke that wasn't smoke, ears ringing with voices that weren't mine. The reformatory didn't settle at sunrise. The jaw still pressed through South Hall. The chapel still smoldered. For the first time, day didn't push it back. The Draken had one foot in the world now. The walls don't just hold prisoners. They hold lungs. They hold hunger. The Draken is breathing again. And when it exhales fully, Ohio won't survive it. I packed a bag at sunrise. Wallet, keys, thermos. I was done. The front gates opened. I drove past them, heart hammering. 3 miles down the road, the reformatory rose again ahead of me. I slammed the brakes, turned back. Same thing. Every direction, every road, led back to the prison. I wasn't leaving. I tried my sister's number. She answered. Her voice trembled, Evan. I had the dream again. Before I could answer, the line filled with the sound of scales scraping. Wet, metallic. Then a hiss, loud enough to split the speaker. Her scream cut through short, sharp. The line went dead. I dropped the phone. A crew showed up, 3 men, orange vests, toolkits. Supposedly state-issued, here to assess structural cracks. Kincaid cursed under his breath. They don't send people. Not anymore. The youngest one, maybe 25, wandered into South Hall. He stopped, staring at the fracture where the jaw pressed through. I shouted. Don't look at it. Too late. The crack yawned. The jaw lunged. His body lifted like a rag doll, snapped in half before he could scream. Blood sprayed the hull. His torso disappeared into stone like water pulling something under. The others ran, boots clanging, leaving their tools scattered. Kincaid just muttered, first feeding. It begins. 2:30 p.m. Kincaid's truth. We sat in the guard station, silent. Finally, he said, I knew this stage was coming. Been stalling it for decades. I swallowed. What do you mean? He lit a cigarette with trembling hands. The Draken wakes in cycles. Every 30 years, the coil weakens. Someone like you gets pulled in. A replacement. A caretaker. He stared at me through the smoke. You're either gonna take my place or end it. The fracture spread to the warden's quarters. The walls cracked down the portrait-lined hallway. Plaster fell in slabs. I stood in the doorway, flashlight shaking. From the split, a tongue slid through. Black, forked, slick with something that steamed where it dripped. It tasted the air. Searching. The portraits of old wardens shook loose, faces splitting, glass shattering. And the voice rumbled again, not from walls, not from Ryan, but from the head itself. Evan. Choose. The Draken isn't waiting behind rules anymore. It's inside the building. Inside the air. And it wants me to decide what happens next. Midnight the chapel. The chapel reeked of ash. The pews were splinters. Behind the altar, something stuck out from the brick leather warped with rot. A book. I pulled it free. The cover tore in my hands. Pages blackened, corners missing, words scrawled in ink and blood. Do not say it. Say it only when it breathes. The coil binds by name. Half the lines ended mid-sentence, clawed through. But over and over, the same refrain. Speak its name when it breathes. The hidden rule. 1 a.m. the problem. But what was the name? I paged through, frantic. Fragments everywhere. Delta Rho Kappa Omega Nu, Draken, in Greek. D3KRN in half-formed Egyptian script. The serpent of breath. The coil that eats its own. None of it was whole. Every name was broken. Like they'd been deliberately cut apart. 1:45 a.m. Ryan's lesson. He was waiting in the cell block. Not behind bars this time, inside the hall, scales blooming across his chest, his voice doubled. "Do you want the name, Evan?" His grin split too wide. The scales cracked his lips. I nodded, throat dry. He hissed syllables that shook the air, "Dra kun sikameter." The words made my ears bleed. My nose ran hot. And still, they felt wrong. Off-key. He laughed. "Almost right. Say it wrong, and it eats you first." 2:30 a.m. The fracture of time. South Hall stretched longer than it ever had. My flashlight beam bent, showing scenes that weren't now. One hall Kincaid younger, standing watch. Another hall me, 2 weeks ago, reading the rules for the first time. Another me again, but older. Gray hair, eyes hollow. Still here. Still guarding. The Draken's breath rattled through each version. Every inhale, every exhale. My chest rose and fell with it. No choice. 3:15 a.m. Kincaid's reflection. Back in the guard station, Kincaid sat smoking. Same as always. But when I looked at the glass of the cell block window, it wasn't his reflection. It was me. Older. 40 years older. Worn thin. Hollow-eyed. And he smiled at me. "See? You're already here." I spun back. Kincaid sat silent, staring. He hadn't moved. 4 a.m. The demand. The voice came again. "Name me." The prison shook. Dust fell in sheets. Iron bars screamed. The jaw pressed deeper into the warden's quarters. Tongue sliding, teeth scraping. "Name me. Or become me." For the first time, I didn't want the sun to rise. Because if the hidden rule was true, if speaking its name during the breath was the only way, I had one night left to learn it. One night before the coil snapped shut. The hidden rule isn't about silence. It's about speech. If I can speak its name right when it breathes, I can end this. If I get it wrong, I'll be the next Kincaid. Or worse. The Reformatory didn't let me leave. But the town was still there. Mansfield. Hollowed out, quiet. The library doors groaned open, dust falling like dead skin. Inside smelled of mold and wet stone. The lights flickered once, then stayed dead. I searched by flashlight. 11 a.m. Folklore. A voice rasped from the archives. "You feel it too, don't you?" An old man, thin as bone, sat hunched over a microfilm machine that hadn't run in decades. He didn't look up. Just spoke like he'd been waiting. "Every 30 years. The prison exhales. Men disappear. Bones rot quicker in the ground. They called it the serpent under stone." He slid a stack of yellowed clippings toward me. Headline after headline. 3 inmates missing, no tunnels found. Guard dies after collapse, body never recovered. Local pastor condemns reformatory, built on hell's coil. The old man's hands trembled. "You can't stop it, son. You can only name it. Bind it." 1:30 p.m. Fragments. The archives gave me scraps. Greek graffiti scrawled in an old prisoner's Bible, Delta Rho Kappa Omega Nu Pi Nu Omicron, Draken No, Serpent of Breath. A half-burnt sermon, found in a chaplain's file, "Beware the coil that eats its young." An Egyptian funerary scrap, inexplicably catalogued here, Sikkim chef, the power that devours. All threads of the same thing. Different tongues. Same monster. The name wasn't one word. It was all of them. Night first attempt. Back at the Reformatory, I tried. South Hall, the fracture yawning wide. The jaw pressed through, teeth dripping. I waited for the breath. Inhale. Exhale. When it inhaled, I whispered, "Draken no." The stone shuddered. The hall buckled. The eye opened, slit wide, blazing gold. The breath stopped. Then the voice came, rattling my skull. Almost. And the walls nearly crushed me where I stood. 2 a.m. Kincaid's fury. Kincaid dragged me back, shoving me against the guard station wall. "You idiot. You'll bring it through faster." I shoved him off. It worked. It reacted. He shook his head, face pale. "You don't understand. Nobody ever gets the whole name. That's why I'm still here. That's why you'll still be here. Better a caretaker than ashes." I saw it then. He wasn't just scared. He wanted me to fail. Because if I didn't, he had no reason left to exist. 3:30 a.m. The last fragment. Back in the chapel, flipping through the ruined journal again, I found it. Half smeared, almost unreadable. No Sikkim chef Draken. And then, in jagged letters, carved into the margin, maybe by a dying hand. Nihesh. The final syllable. Or close enough. 5 a.m. The promise. The Draken's breath rattled through every wall, louder than before. I whispered the full chain of syllables, barely audible. The prison didn't collapse this time. It went silent. And then the voice hissed, long and sharp. Yes. Kincaid wouldn't look at me. Ryan's grin haunted the South Hall, waiting. The prison wasn't fighting me anymore. It was waiting for me to say it aloud, full, during its breath. One more night. That's all I had. The hidden rule is clear now, speak its name during the breath. I almost have it whole. But if I get it wrong, I won't die. I'll become the caretaker. Forever. Midnight. The warden's quarters. The fracture split ceiling to floor. The Draken's jaw pressed through, teeth slick with stone dust and saliva. Each breath rattled the glass of broken portraits. I waited. Flashlight trembling in my hand. The inhale came. Slow. Deep. I spoke. Draken no Sikkim chef no. The word caught. My tongue stumbled. Nihesh. The hall roared. The walls split outward. Iron screamed. The portraits exploded off the wall, glass like rain. The head pushed farther than ever, one golden eye blazing full. A hiss blasted me against the far wall. My ribs cracked. The voice shook everything. Wrong. Ryan's laughter. He stepped out of the shadows. No longer pretending human. Scales swallowed his skin, his jaw unhinged wide. You thought I'd hand it to you clean. His laughter rolled like thunder. I gave you my ending. Not its. The air bent around him. His shadow moved like a serpent, devouring the floor. The jaw lunged. I barely saw it, just a wall of teeth. Then Kincaid slammed into me, knocking me clear. His arm caught the breath. Stone grew over it instantly, crawling up his shoulder, his chest. He screamed once, then shoved me away with the last of his strength. Run. By the time I hit the hall, half his body was fused into the wall. His face twisted in pain, but his eyes locked on mine. Finish it. Then the stone sealed. He was gone. 2 a.m. The broken prison. The reformatory wasn't itself anymore. Halls bent into each other. Cell blocks looped back, infinite spirals of bars and screams. Inmates I'd never met stared from the cells, mouths opening in unison. Each one screamed a different version of the name. None worked. The air stank of sulfur and burning bone. 3:30 a.m. The lesson. In the infirmary, words covered the walls in blood and ash. Scrawled by dozens of hands. It is not the name alone. It is the belief. Speak in doubt, and it devours. I dropped to my knees, shaking. All this time, it wasn't about syllables. It was about certainty. 4:45 a.m. The whisper. The Draken's voice followed me through every hall, closer with each breath. Try again. I clutched the words in my head, the fragments of its name. But my throat was raw. My faith cracked. Because I knew, if I doubted, I'd join the walls like Kincaid. I staggered back to the guard station. Alone. The prison was still twisting, still breathing. But it hadn't killed me. Not yet. It was waiting. For one last attempt. The hidden rule wasn't just about speaking its name. It was about believing it. One night left. One chance. And if I fail, I'll be the next stone face staring from the wall. 8 p.m. The wall. I couldn't bury Kincaid. He was already part of the wall. But sometimes, when I passed South Hall, I swore I heard him. Not words. Just the drag of breath. The spark of a lighter. And the faintest whisper. Don't flinch. 9:30 p.m. Ryan's bargain. He found me in the chapel. Still wearing his prison uniform, though the scales had eaten most of it away. You don't have to fight, Evan. Nobody ever wins. He leaned close. His breath reeked of iron and ash. Take the caretaker's place. Keep the rules. Feed it scraps every cycle. You'll live. Longer than you'd think. I almost wanted to believe him. But then I saw Kincaid's face in my head, half stone, half man, trapped forever. No. Ryan's grin widened until it split his cheek. Then you'll burn. 11 p.m. Practice. I stood in an empty block, the silence crushing. I whispered the name. Draken no Seekum Chef Nihesh. The air rippled. But the second I doubted, the syllables warped, twisting in my throat. The walls hissed, scales pushing through the cracks. I bit my tongue until it bled, forcing myself to finish the word. The prison quieted. Barely. Midnight, the living prison. The reformatory was alive now. Cell bars curved into serpent coils. Floors pulsed under my boots. Doors slammed shut if I lingered too long. Every hall bent inward, steering me toward the warden's quarters. 2 a.m. The writing. My hands shook too much. I couldn't trust memory. So I carved the name into my arm with a penknife. Ink bled first, then blood followed. It burned. But the letters stayed. The name wouldn't leave me now. 3:30 a.m. Final walk. I passed the murals, the chapel, South Hall. Every wall hissed with breath. Every step echoed like heartbeat. The reformatory wasn't just stone anymore. It was the Draken's body. And I was walking down its throat. 4 a.m. The quarters. The fracture split wider than ever. The Draken's head forced through teeth longer than I was tall, eye blazing with fire. Its tongue slid across the floor, tasting for me. The inhale rattled my bones. I stood in the doorway, words carved into my skin, blood dripping. Ready. The next breath would decide everything. No more rules. No more caretakers. One breath left. One word left. Tomorrow, it ends. 4:02 a.m. The chamber. The warden's quarters was gone. What stood in its place wasn't a room, it was a throat. Stone walls slick with saliva, curling inward like ribs. The fracture had become a wound, and through it the Draken pressed, massive and ancient, its body scraping at dimensions too small to contain it. The air burned my lungs. Every inhale it took stripped dust, paint, even bolts from the walls. One more breath, and it would pull me in too. 4:05 a.m. The name. I clutched my arm, the carved letters sticky with ink and blood. The name was there. It was mine. But my throat tightened. If I mispronounced, even once, the Draken would claim me the way it had claimed the others. Behind me, Ryan's voice slithered through the dark. Say it wrong. Be mine. I'll carry you into eternity. And from the wall, softer, faint as dust, Kincaid. Don't flinch. 4:08 a.m. The inhale. The Draken drew breath. It was like standing in the path of a tornado. My skin peeled back. My bones screamed. My blood wanted to leap out of my veins and into its mouth. I staggered, but I didn't fall. The letters on my arm glowed faintly, hot as iron. 4:09 a.m. Speaking. I forced the word out. Draken. The air warped. Its eye blazed hotter. No. The pressure doubled, cracking windows, shattering lights. Seekum chef. The syllables scraped my throat raw. My teeth rattled. My vision narrowed to a pinprick. But I didn't stop. Nihesh. The last word tore out of me, blood spraying with it. 4:10 a.m. The silence. The Draken froze. For the first time since I set foot in this place, silence. No hiss. No inhale. Just stillness. Its head tilted, massive eye locking on me. Inside that burning iris, I saw forests turn to desert, rivers dry to bone, empires rise and crumble. It saw me too. And then it pulled back. 4:12 a.m. Collapse. The fracture sealed, stone folding over like scar tissue. The bars straightened. The air cleared. The Reformatory exhaled, long and slow, until the halls were just halls again. The prison was still haunted, sure. But the hunger was gone. The cycle was broken. 6 a.m. Dawn. The sun spilled through the high windows. For the first time in months, I breathed without ash in my throat. Ryan was gone. Kincaid was gone. The whispers faded. It was just me. Alive. I don't know if the Draken is dead. Maybe it's just waiting. But the rules are broken now. And if anyone else tries to take this job, they won't find a list on the desk. They'll just find the carvings on the wall, my handwriting, one line repeated. Don't flinch. 1 week later outside. I thought leaving would feel clean. It didn't. The first morning I drove out through those rusted gates, the sun on my face, the weight of stone behind me, I thought I'd cry. Thought I'd laugh. Instead, I just gripped the wheel until my knuckles cracked, staring straight ahead, like the prison might sprout legs and follow me. It didn't. But its shadow did. Nights. I don't sleep much. When I close my eyes, I hear the inhale. Not the roar of it, not anymore. Just the start. The catch in the lungs. The sound before the sound. Every time, I jolt awake. My chest tight, my lips dry, the name on my arm itching like a fresh burn. I stopped bandaging it. The letters are scars now. Dark, raised. Permanent. I thought maybe I could bury it. Forget it. But forgetting doesn't work. So I read instead. Old Greek fragments. Egyptian hymns. Dusty, untranslated scraps in the back rooms of the library. There it was. Always the same thing, breath. Not fire, not claw, not teeth. Breath. The Draken wasn't meant to live here. It wasn't meant to live anywhere. It was the gap between life and death, the inhale before the exhale. And somehow, the Reformatory called it. Or trapped it. Or maybe both. A man came to see me. Said he worked with the department. No badge. No name. Just a thin smile and a notebook. Asked me how I stopped it. Asked me if I'd do it again. I told him no. He didn't write that down. Sometimes I think the scar is moving. Not fast. Just different when I wake than when I sleep. The letters crawl, shift, line up in new ways. Once, they spelled something I didn't recognize. I copied it down. When I whispered it under my breath, my lamp flickered and a line of dust lifted off the carpet like it was being sucked away. I haven't said it again. Not yet. I don't work nights anymore. I don't go near prisons. But I keep a candle burning in the window. And I keep the word close, scratched into notebooks, written on scraps stuffed in drawers, carved into the back of my headboard. Because I don't think it's over. The Draken pulled back. It sealed the wound. But it saw me. And the way its eye locked onto mine. It wasn't rage. It was recognition. Like it knew me. Like it was waiting for me to inhale. It came 3 weeks after I left. A knock at the door, 3 taps, sharp and deliberate. When I opened it, a woman stood there. Not in uniform, not in black suits either. Just jeans, boots, a heavy jacket. But her eyes were wrong, not glowing, not inhuman. Just too steady. "Evan Marks?" she asked. I nodded. "You've been marked," she said. "And if you stay here, it'll spread." 10 p.m. The scar. She was right. That night, the scar on my arm flared so hot I thought it would split open. The letters shifted again. This time, they formed a shape. Not a word. A map. Ohio in miniature, a crooked line stretching west. The scar was pointing somewhere. The woman poured black coffee into a chipped mug and slid it across my kitchen table. "We don't kill these things," she said. "We keep them quiet. We tend them. We pay the debt. You broke the cycle at Mansfield. That's never been done." I told her I didn't want any part of it. She smiled, a sad, tired thing. "You already are." I drove at dawn. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't pack much. Just followed the scar. The line burned hotter as I drove west, past farmland, through small towns that looked empty even when they weren't. By nightfall, I reached the marker, a truck stop off I-70. Neon buzzing, half the bulbs dead. And the second I stepped inside, I knew. The air tasted the same. Like ash and iron. The second cage. It wasn't a prison this time. It was a diner. Chrome counters, cracked vinyl booths, pie displays under dusty glass. The waitress smiled too wide. Her eyes slid to my arm, lingered on the scar. And then she whispered, soft enough only I could hear. "You're late." The Draken was breath. But breath belongs to lungs. And lungs belong to a body. If Mansfield was just one piece, what the hell else is still breathing under America's skin? The truck stop was alive in the way only dying places are. Neon half dead, radio buzzing static, truckers hunched over coffee that never steamed. I sat at the counter. The waitress, pale, smiling too much, slid me a cup. Her name tag read, Gale. When I touched it, the scar burned. That's when I noticed, nobody else was breathing. The truckers sat stiff, cups in hand, but their chests didn't rise. No inhale. No exhale. Just silence. The back room. Gail leaned close. Her voice was soft, raw. You can't stay out here. Come to the back. She led me past the kitchen, into a room lit by one dangling bulb. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings. Disappearances. Accidents. People vanishing off I-70. And in the center of the table, laid out neat as scripture. A new list of rules. The rules of the Hollow Diner. 1. Do not speak between 3:13 and 3:18 a.m. The air belongs to something else during those minutes. 2. If the jukebox plays without coins, leave the diner floor immediately. Wait in the restroom with the lights off until the song ends. 3. Do not watch the truckers too closely. They are not who they were. 4. At dawn, count the breaths in the room. If there are fewer than 12, run. Do not look back. I stared at the paper. This isn't my cage, I said. Gail shook her head. It is now. 3:13 hit. The scar lit like fire. The truckers at the counter moved all at once, like puppets. Their mouths opened wide, wider than jaws should go. The air went out. Not in. Every scrap of oxygen pulled toward them. My chest seized. I clamped a hand over my mouth, fighting not to gasp. The scar writhed. I wanted to scream. But I remembered Rule 1. Not a sound. 3:18 came. The air snapped back. The truckers sat still again, as if nothing had moved. I staggered, gasping. Gail watched me, hollow-eyed. You see now, she said. The Reformatory wasn't the only wound. There are others. And they're waking up. The Draken had breath. Now I'd found its lungs. And every cage I opened was one step closer to the whole body. 2:59 a.m. waiting. I sat in the back room. The list of rules lay on the table. My scar pulsed with heat. It wanted me on the floor when 3:13 came. But Kincaid's warning echoed in my head. Don't flinch. 3:12 a.m. the shift. The jukebox rattled. No coins. No one touched it. A song crawled out slow, warped, like a hymn played backward. I remembered Rule 2. I slipped into the restroom, killed the light, and pressed my back against the wall. Through the door, I heard the truckers stand. Their boots dragged across tile. The music bent their movements into rhythm. Something knocked on the restroom door. Once. Twice. 3 times. I didn't answer. 3:13 a.m. silence. The song cut. The air drained. My ears popped. My chest clenched. The oxygen vanished. Through the thin bathroom door, I heard them. Not voices. Not breathing. Just the hollow rattle of lungs pulling on nothing. One of them whispered, hoarse, right against the crack of the door. Share. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. My vision blackened. 3:18 hit. Air snapped back. I fell to my knees, gasping. Alive. I counted the breaths, like Rule 4 said. 1. 2. 3. 11. Not 12. The truckers sat still, but their heads all turned toward me at once. Chairs screeched as they rose. I didn't think. I ran. Through the diner, past the flickering neon, out into the pale light of dawn. The truckers followed to the doorway but no further. They stopped, blank eyes staring, mouths slack. The scar on my arm pulsed once more, then cooled. I was out. But the diner still breathed behind me. Mansfield was breath. The hollow diner was lungs. And now I knew. Each cage wasn't just a haunting. It was a piece of something bigger. Something that wanted to wake whole. And I was carrying the map on my skin. I drove west until the gas light blinked. Every mile, the scar itched hotter. Not the wild burn of the cages, a steady pulse, like a heartbeat. It was leading me to people. I found them in an old barn off a county road. No signs, no lights. Just 3 cars parked in weeds. Inside, a circle of chairs. 6 people. The woman from my door, Gail, was there. But different. Less waitress, more warden. They all looked at me like they'd been waiting years. They called themselves caretakers. Not officials. Not priests. Just people bound to places like Mansfield, like the diner. "We don't fight them," one man said, voice raw from cigarettes. "We keep them fed. We keep them still." I asked how many cages there were. A silence fell. Finally, Gail answered. "More than roads. More than towns. Enough that if they all woke at once," she shook her head, "the body would stand." Not all of them agreed. One woman, hair white, eyes sharp, spat on the ground. "Why bind what should rule? The Draken is older than this country, older than stone. We aren't caretakers. We're midwives." The room split in 2, keepers versus worshippers. And me, stuck in the middle. While they argued, the scar writhed. Letters shifted, rearranging under my skin. This time not into rules. Not a map. But a word. Next. The caretakers said I was chosen. The worshippers said I was doomed. But the scar didn't care about sides. It only cared about movement. And it was already dragging me toward the next cage. They took me to a silo at the far end of the farm. Rusted metal, hollow inside. At first glance, empty. But when I stepped in, the scar burned. The air was thick, syrup slow. Something was in there. Not visible. Not breathing. Just waiting. The caretakers moved like it was routine. Buckets of water. Bags of grain. And my stomach turned, a cage with 2 rabbits inside. "This one's mild," Gail said. "It only wants what it can't have. Thirst. Hunger. Life." They poured the water out onto the dirt. Spilled the grain where it rotted. Then slit the rabbits' throats. The air drank it all. My arm flared, letters crawling. It wasn't just watching. It was counting. Every drop, every gasp, every wasted thing, the scar tallied it, marking it into my skin. Like it wanted me to remember. After, some of them knelt in silence. Others smoked like nothing happened. One man, eyes wet, muttered, "We can't keep this up. It's spreading. Every year it asks for more." The white-haired woman smiled sharp. "Then let it. The body deserves to breathe again." They turned to me then. "You stopped Mansfield," Gail said. "That wasn't supposed to happen. You don't just bind, you break. And maybe that's worse." I didn't answer. Because the scar was crawling again, spelling fresh letters down my arm. One word. Move. I left before dawn. The caretakers could argue, feed, kneel all they wanted. But the scar wasn't theirs. It was mine. And it was already pointing me toward the next cage. The scar woke me before sunrise. I wasn't even sleeping. Just lying there, sore, staring at the motel ceiling. But when it flared, I knew. It wanted me moving. I packed in 15 minutes. Left the keys on the counter. The clerk didn't look at me. I don't think she could. The road out of Mansfield is long and flat. Cornfields like dead teeth. Silos like ribs poking the sky. And behind me, headlights. Not close. But steady. I didn't need to guess who. The caretakers weren't letting me drift off easy. By noon I had to pull over. My arm was on fire, the letters crawling like ants. When I pulled up the sleeve, I saw a new pattern. Not words this time. Arrows. Jagged lines tugging my wrist east, like it wanted me to turn. Every wrong road, the pain doubled. Every right one, it cooled. It was steering me. By evening, the headlights came closer. Same pickup that was at the farm. 3 men inside. No lights now, just rolling slow. I cut through side roads, towns barely holding on. Gas stations with one pump, churches with peeling paint. But they followed. Always at the edge of sight. The scar kept pointing me forward. Like it knew they'd come. After nightfall, I hit an abandoned strip of highway. The scar went wild, searing hot, letters blooming up to my shoulder. Ahead, a collapsed bridge. Below, a dry riverbed filled with rusted cars, dumped decades ago. And in the hollow of that wreckage something breathing. Not like lungs. Like the earth itself was sucking air. The scar cooled instantly, as if saying, "We've arrived." I killed the headlights. Sat there with the engine running, heart thudding. Behind me, the caretaker's truck finally stopped. No movement. Just waiting. And in front of me, the bridge moaned, metal shifting like it remembered what it used to hold. The scar burned again, one word twisting across my forearm. Enter. I sat in the car till the fuel gauge dipped below E. The caretaker's truck idled behind me, lights off. No one moved. Like we were all waiting to see which way the scar would twitch first. Finally, one of them stepped out. Tall, lean, denim jacket, hands raised. "We don't mean to harm you, Evan," he said. "But you can't just walk into cages blind. That's not how it works." My arm itched. Letters clawed up my skin, bright as fresh burns. Lies. Another caretaker leaned out the truck window. His face was pale, strained. "Let him go," he called. "If the scar's pointing, it's not our choice anymore." "Shut up," the tall one snapped. "It's not his to steer. He's not one of us." I realized then they weren't united. They were circling their own fear like wolves, snapping at each other while the real beast breathed beneath us. The scar didn't wait for votes. It seared my arms so hard I dropped to my knees. The letters twisted, all pointing one direction, down. So I climbed. Over the guardrail, down the embankment, boots sliding on loose stone. The riverbed was colder than night should be. Smelled like rust and mildew. And under the bridge, between car husks half swallowed by silt, something shifted. It wasn't a creature at first. More like pressure. The air bent, thick and wrong. One of the cars groaned, metal folding like paper. Then I saw it, a shape pressed against the dark, enormous and coiled. Not snake. Not fish. Something older, scaled in a way that reflected no light. The scar pulsed once, a warning heartbeat. And then the thing opened an eye. Above me, I heard shouting the caretakers, arguing, calling my name. But down here, sound didn't matter. The eye fixed on me. And in my arm, the scar began writing faster than I could read, letters slicing into skin. "Do not move." The scar screamed across my skin. One message, over and over. "Do not move." So I didn't. Not even a breath deeper than I had to. The eye under the bridge stayed on me. Golden, cracked, like old glass with something boiling behind it. Minutes passed like hours. I realized then this wasn't random. It was measuring me. Watching how long I could obey. And when my knees shook, the scar punished me, burning hotter, forcing me still. I was its marionette. Shouts from above. Rocks clattering down the embankment. One of the caretakers had followed. "Don't listen to it," he barked. "That thing wants you frozen, till you die." The others screamed at him to shut up. But it was too late. The eye shifted past me, onto him. The man froze mid-step. Blood poured from his nose. His teeth rattled out one by one, clattering on the stones. He toppled, silent. The entity didn't move from the shadows. It didn't need to. Its attention was enough. And for a second, I felt that attention slide back to me cold and heavy, like I was already buried under the riverbed. The scar flared again, new letters tearing their way up my arm. Bow. I didn't think. I just dropped. Face to the dirt. Forehead against rust and rot. The pressure lifted. When I looked up, the eye had closed. The air loosened. The cage settled back into silence. Above, the caretakers scrambled, dragging their man's body up the slope. Some screamed at me to leave, others begged me to stay. I didn't wait for consensus. The scar had written its second rule clear into my flesh. Stillness. Submission. And I knew this was only the beginning of what it demanded. They buried the man at dawn. No headstone, no prayer. Just a shallow hole by the tree lean, dirt packed quick. Nobody spoke to me. The scar was still hot, words burned in, stillness. Submission. I traced the letters with my other hand, half expecting them to fade. They didn't. By midday, the caretakers circled me. "You dragged it out," one said. "It never should have noticed him." Another shook her head. "No. It marked him. He's chosen. We can't touch that." Their voices cracked with hunger and fear, like they weren't arguing about me but about keeping their own little system intact. That night, I went back to the bridge alone. Didn't go under. Just stood at the rail. The scar pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. I tried moving slow, one step back, one step forward. The burn shifted with me, nudging, correcting. It wasn't just rules. It was a leash. The riverbed stayed dark. No eye, no sound. But in the silence I felt it, the weight of attention pressing again, like a finger against glass. And the scar tore open new letters down my wrist, blood beating where the skin split. Feed. I staggered back, sleeve sticky, arm throbbing. The word wouldn't stop glowing on my skin. Feed. Feed what? Rabbits? People? Myself? It didn't explain. It never did. Just sat under the bridge, waiting. And I knew if I ignored it something worse would happen. The caretakers saw me come back pale, bleeding. They didn't ask. They didn't need to. They'd seen the third rule written before. And in their eyes, I saw it clear. They expected me to be the one who carried it out. The scar didn't stop bleeding all night. Every time I wiped my arm, the letters returned carved deeper, wetter. Feed. I clenched my teeth and whispered, no. The next morning, the caretakers watched me. No breakfast, no small talk. They were waiting. I didn't move. Didn't bring them food, didn't bring the cage food. By noon, the air grew heavy. Like the whole sky sagged closer. My ears popped. My vision swam. The scar flared again, angrier now, letters shaking. Feed. I whispered again, no. The first sound was metal screaming. Back under the bridge, the rusted cars began to twist, doors ripping open, glass shattering. Then came the smell: copper, wet earth, rot. One of the caretakers staggered, clutching his chest. Blood bubbled out of his mouth. He fell before anyone could catch him. The cage had fed itself. Silence after. The body still warm, steam rising in the chill air. Every caretaker's eyes turned to me. "You think you can say no?" Gail hissed. Her hands shook as she pointed at the corpse. "It doesn't ask, Evan. It takes." The scar cooled, satisfied. But I knew it wouldn't be the last demand. That night, I lay awake staring at the letters glowing faint under my skin. Feed. Not a suggestion. Not a request. A cycle. And if I didn't pick what to give it next time, it would pick for me. The caretakers dragged the body to the tree line, same as before. No prayer, no marker. But this time, when the dirt hit, they all looked at me. "You understand now," Gail said. "It won't stop asking. Best we feed it our way before it decides again." Her tone made it sound like routine. Like a chore. Like feeding hogs. That night they brought me a crate. Inside, a stray dog, half-starved, ribs showing. "Simple," Gail said. "Blood, breath, bone. Won't take much." The dog whimpered, tail between its legs. I felt the scar flare, the word pulsing again: feed. But it didn't burn for the dog. Not yet. I snapped the crate shut. No. The caretakers erupted: shouts, curses, fists shaking. "You don't get to refuse," one spat. But the scar didn't blaze with anger this time. It just waited. Like it was watching me choose. I went back to the bridge alone. Carried a tin pail of water. Bread gone stale. A knife in my pocket, just in case. The air was heavy. The scar lit up, dragging me closer. I tipped the pail out. Water splashed, dark in the dust. Broke the bread, tossed the pieces down. And then, my hand shaking, I drew the knife across my palm. A few drops. That was all. The blood hissed where it hit the dirt. The eye opened in the shadows. Golden, hungry. It saw. And then it closed again. The scar cooled. I staggered back, dizzy but alive. The caretakers were waiting at the top of the embankment, silent, pale. "You fed it wrong," one whispered. But the scar didn't punish me. It wrote something new across my arm, slow, deliberate. "You chose." The caretakers didn't whisper anymore. They argued in daylight. "He cheated it," Gail spat. "Blood's not enough. It'll come back hungrier." But another, the youngest, shook his head. "It stopped. You saw it. He's doing something we never could." Every eye kept darting to me. Like I was both savior and disease. That night I came armed with scraps. A silver key I found in the glove box of my rusted car. A page torn from the prison logbook, smeared with ink. And another cut across my palm, though smaller this time. The scar glowed faint, urging me closer. I dropped the key first. The shadows swallowed it whole, no sound. The logbook page next. It curled, blackened, then vanished, not burned, but erased. Finally, blood. A few drops. The eye opened. It wasn't hunger this time. It was attention. The scar heated, but not in anger. Letters climbed my arm, deliberate, almost calm. Accepted. Then, a second line beneath it. Not enough. When I climbed back, Gail was waiting with 3 others. Knives in hand. "You think you can bargain with it?" she snarled. You think it talks to you now? We've given it decades. Sacrificed more than you'll ever know. I tightened my fist, scar still glowing. It listened to me, I said. Not you. That nearly set them off, but something in the shadows below groaned, metal twisting like thunder. They backed away, pale, muttering curses. Later, alone in my car, the scar flared again. New words, sharper than before. Bring more. No explanation. No limits. Just a demand. And I realized by proving it would accept my choices, I'd only opened the door wider. I started small. A pocket knife. A tin of gas station coffee. Both vanished under the bridge without a sound. Then I tried bigger. An old tire. A crate of scrap metal. The cage ate those two, twisting them, bending them into its dark, unseen shape. The scar pulsed hot, more. I brought the stray dog. Hands shaking, I opened the crate at the edge of the riverbed. The dog bolted into the shadows. Yelped once. Silence. The scar cooled. Satisfied. But I felt something else, a vibration in the earth, faint but growing. Not just hunger. Construction. Like it was making room. When I climbed back up, they were waiting. No more knives, no threats. Guns this time. You're not feeding it, Gail said, voice trembling. You're waking it. And when it wakes, it won't stop with you. Her hands shook on the rifle. Behind her, the others nodded, eyes wide with fear. For the first time, I realized, they weren't protecting the cage. They were protecting the world from it. The scar burned white hot, brighter than fire. Letters ripped across my skin, so fast I couldn't catch them all. But one word burned clearer than the rest. Kill. The caretakers saw my face. Saw the glow on my arm. And they knew before I did what the cage was asking. The rifle stayed raised. My scar blazed. And somewhere under the bridge, something vast shifted, waiting for me to choose. The scar wasn't a wound anymore. It was a leash. Every second, it pulled, whispering that one word over and over until it drowned out my own thoughts. Kill. 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 My hand twitched toward the nearest caretaker. Gail raised her rifle. The others spread out, surrounding me. You let it mark you, she hissed. Now you're its mouthpiece. If you don't fight it, you'll bring it through. I wanted to shout that I was fighting. That I hadn't given in. But my body betrayed me. My foot slid forward. My hand clenched. The cage pulsed under the bridge, like it was cheering me on. I bit my tongue hard enough to bleed. The pain cut through the fog, gave me 1 second of clarity. In that second, I dropped the flashlight I carried, not to surrender, but to buy time. The beam rolled toward the caretakers, scattering shadows across the yard. The scar screamed on my arm. My skin blistered. I wasn't obeying. And the cage didn't like that. The air bent. The ground rippled like water. And behind me, the reformatory groaned like it was alive. Windows shattered. Doors slammed. Iron bars twisted. The caretakers staggered, covering their ears. The scar changed its word, just for a moment. Feed. I couldn't kill them. But I could give the cage something. Something heavy. Something alive. I ran. Not at the caretakers. At the truck. Hot-wired the ignition with shaking hands and floored it toward the bridge. The scar cooled as the cage drank in the offering engine block, wheels, everything. The truck vanished into the dark. The caretakers watched in horror. And I realized I'd bought myself one more night. The scar pulsed once, softer this time, almost satisfied. But Gail's voice cut through the silence. You think you bought time. What you bought is interest. And when the debt comes due, it won't be just you paying it. I woke up with words on my skin. Not carved, not burned. Just there, like condensation on glass. Rule 6. Do not answer when it calls your name. I hadn't written that. Nobody had. The scar pulsed, and for a moment I thought I heard my own voice whispering back at me. You're learning. You're mine. The shift in the reformatory. That night, the prison wasn't quiet. Shadows moved in ways they hadn't before. Long arms brushing along walls. A shuffle of scales on stone. When I walked the east corridor, the iron doors didn't sit still. They leaned inward, like something pressed from the other side. And the smell like wet copper and burning cedar. Every inmate who'd ever been buried under this place was restless. Gail's warning. She found me near Block D, my flashlight shaking. You've heard it, haven't you? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Don't let it say your name, Evan. The first syllable binds the soul. The second takes the flesh. The third. She stopped. Didn't need to finish. My scar throbbed in reply, hot as coals. At 3:17 a.m., the lights cut out. When they came back, something stood at the end of the corridor. Not all the way real. Not all the way shadow. A long neck bent low, teeth too sharp for any animal I knew. Scales that shimmered like broken glass. And its voice, it used my own voice. Evan. The scar burned white. I clamped my hands over my ears, stumbled backward. But the scar moved on its own, tracing letters across my forearm like ink in fire. Obey or burn. The caretakers were shouting somewhere behind me, but it didn't matter. It wasn't them the thing wanted. It wanted me to answer. My throat tightened. The word almost escaped. But I bit it back. Didn't speak. Didn't answer. The shadow convulsed, broke apart into smoke. The lights flickered back on. The reformatory groaned like a stomach left empty too long. The cage wasn't satisfied. That was the first night I knew for sure, the rules weren't just human survival tricks. They were its language. Every one of them was part of a sentence Drogon was still writing. And the scar was teaching me how to read it. The writing didn't fade this time. Every few hours, the scar scrawled a new line across my arm. Always rules. Always precise. That night it burned in block letters. Rule 7. When it knocks, you must knock back. 3 times. No more. No less. I didn't want to believe it. But the burn didn't stop until I whispered the words out loud. The first knock. It came near 2 a.m. A single boom on the cell block door. Too heavy for any living hand. The sound made my teeth ache. My scar pulsed like a drumbeat in rhythm. Knock back. I froze. Didn't move. The silence afterward was worse than the sound. Gail's intervention. I found her pacing the guard office. You heard it, didn't you? I nodded. You didn't knock back. I shook my head. Her face went pale. Then tonight won't end clean. Before I could answer, the reformatory groaned again. A second knock rolled through the halls. By 3 a.m., doors opened on their own. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. And from the far end of the yard, a voice called in my exact tone. Evan. Knock. The scar blistered. I dropped to my knees. It wasn't asking anymore. It was ordering. I grabbed a baton from the desk, dragged it across the nearest cell bars. Clang. 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 3 times. The scar cooled instantly. The air stilled. And for a second, I thought maybe I'd survived the night. But Gail's voice behind me was tight, furious. "You knocked on the wrong bars." I spun around. The ones I'd hit belonged to Block D. The scar had wanted Block E. And now the sound of something rising from the basement, scales scraping, wings dragging. A wrong knock wasn't silence. It was an invitation. By dawn, the caretakers had sealed the lower levels. But I know what I heard moving down there. It wasn't just the cage anymore. It was him. And the scar was still writing. The scar wrote again by dusk. This time it didn't wait until night. It burned while I was awake, in broad daylight, in front of everyone. Rule 8. Do not look down when the floor bends. The caretakers saw it. Nobody spoke. But Gail's jaw tightened. She knew. After midnight, the reformatory groaned like a ship at sea. Concrete rippled under my boots. Tiles slid over one another like teeth. And when I glanced down against every instinct I saw something moving beneath the floor. Scales scraping concrete. Eyes like furnace doors, blinking open and shut. The scar seared me for looking. It didn't whisper this time. It roared. Through pipes, vents, walls, even the steel bars. Evan. The word wasn't a sound. It was pressure, forcing my knees to buckle. The caretakers dropped to the ground. Gail covered her ears and screamed. The scar on my arm pulsed in time with the roar, demanding, answer. The temperature spiked. Every light bulb shattered. Sparks rained down like fireflies. And the air itself, it smelled like smoke. Not just any smoke. Ancient. Dry. Like charred stone after a lightning strike. The shadows flickered. Shapes of wings stretched across the walls, wings bigger than the block itself. The bridge outside thundered. Metal screamed like it was tearing apart. The caretakers scrambled, chanting words I didn't know, trying to patch cracks that ran like veins of fire through the floor. Gail grabbed me by the collar. You've got to resist it. If you answer, it comes through. If you look down, it comes through. If you give it anything. The scar flared, cutting her off. One last time, the voice boomed. Evan. Knock. And for a heartbeat, I saw it. Not a full body. Just an eye. The size of a door. Yellow. Slitted. Ancient. It blinked once and the whole block went dark. When the lights returned, the floor was normal. The caretakers were gone. Only Gail and I remained, breathing hard in the silence. But the scar didn't cool this time. It stayed hot. Because Drogon hadn't left. He was waiting. The rule that wasn't written. For 3 nights, the scar stayed quiet. No words. No burns. Just heat, like banked coals waiting for wind. It was almost worse than when it wrote rules. At least then I knew what not to do. The silence meant something bigger was coming. Gail cornered me in the yard. The cage is thinning, she said. Her eyes looked sunken, sleepless. It's going to test its body against the bars. You need to remember, don't touch it. No matter what. Why? I asked. Because it remembers skin. And if you give it yours, you'll never get it back. At 2:11 a.m., the bridge shook. The air turned black, thick with soot. And the reformatory itself, every wall, every barred window lit up from inside, glowing orange like a furnace. The floor cracked under my boots. Fire bled through the seams. The cage wasn't holding anymore. The east wall of Block E split open like a ribcage. And through it came something that shouldn't fit. Not the whole body. Just a piece. A wing, first massive, scaled, each feathered edge tipped in fire. It scraped the ceiling, sparks cascading like molten rain. Then a muzzle forced through. Long jaw lined with teeth that steamed in the night air. The smell was overwhelming. Burnt stone. Old blood. It opened one eye. The same I'd glimpsed before, but real this time, no shadows, no tricks. The heat from it blistered my face even from 20 feet away. And when it blinked, the scar on my arm blinked with it. Perfect sync. The caretakers chanted from the mezzanine, torches raised high. Every word made Drogon thrash, smashing bars, shattering concrete. Gale pulled me back as debris fell, screaming over the chaos. He knows you. You're the door. The scar flared white, and I nearly blacked out. Drogon shoved harder, half his head through the wall now. Stone melted around his jaws. His breath alone was flame. And then he spoke. Not through vents, not through shadows. Direct. Evan. The sound tore through me. My knees gave out. The scar burned with a single command, touch. I raised my hand without meaning to. The air between us shimmered. And Gale slammed her palm down on mine, forcing it back to my side. The spell broke. Drogon roared, wings smashing the ceiling. The reformatory trembled like it would collapse. Then, with a groan like the earth itself closing, the wall knit shut. The wing, the muzzle, the eye all gone. For now. Gale didn't let go of my hand until dawn. Her palm was burned raw where it had touched mine, like she'd taken the scar's heat onto herself. And the look in her eyes said it plain. This wasn't just my fight anymore. The scar wakes early. It used to burn only at night. Now it burns whenever it pleases. In the grocery store. Driving home. Even in the shower, where steam curls into shapes I don't want to recognize. I'll be holding something ordinary, a jug of milk, a set of keys, and suddenly my arm jerks, trying to crush it. Trying to feed it. We met in the diner outside Mansfield. You're carrying more of him now, she said, voice low, eyes darting to the other customers. The breach wasn't just out there. It was in you. What does that mean? It means you're a walking crack in the cage. And if you don't close it, he'll walk through you. She slid me a vial of something dark. Drink this when the scar speaks too loud. It won't cure it. But it'll buy you minutes. 2 days later, it happened in line at the gas station. The scar flared. My knees buckled. A voice, Drogon's voice, roared inside my skull. Take. Feed. My hand shot out toward the cashier's throat before I could stop it. The man didn't even notice, but Gale's veal was in my pocket. I uncapped it with my teeth, down the bitter sludge. The command weakened. My hand dropped. But the scar stayed hot, humming like a live wire. Back at the reformatory, the caretakers were waiting. You can't leave anymore, one said flatly. He rides with you now. Every step outside spreads the breach wider. Gale argued, but they wouldn't budge. You are not a guard, another hissed. You are a vessel. And vessels don't get days off. The scar pulsed in agreement. That night I dreamed of fire, but it wasn't a dream. I woke standing in the east block, barefoot, ash coating my skin. The scar glowed like molten iron, lighting the corridor. And in front of me, a door had appeared where no door should be. Behind it, breath. Heavy. Ancient. The voice whispered, gentle this time. Open, Evan. Just open. I pressed both hands against the scar, trying to smother the heat. Not tonight, I whispered. Not yet. The door quivered, wood smoldering. Then, mercifully, it faded into the wall. But the scar didn't cool. It laughed. It used to be that the danger lived in the prison. Now it lives in me. And I don't know how much longer I can keep it from using my voice, my hands, my body. Maybe I'm not a guard anymore. Maybe I'm just the lock. The sun rose twice that morning. I saw it from my post. The same gray sky brightened, dimmed, then brightened again, as if the day stuttered. The scar throbbed in rhythm with it. Every caretaker froze. They didn't look surprised. Just resigned. "It's starting," Gale whispered. During rounds, the halls wouldn't stay put. Block C led into Block E into the chapel. The chapel into the yard, even though I'd never passed through a door. Each time I circled back, the scar pulsed harder, steering me like a compass. It wasn't the reformatory twisting. It was him, reshaping his cage to fit his body. At 1:06 a.m., the bars began to drip. Not rust. Not water. Iron itself, running like wax. The air was so hot I couldn't breathe. One of the caretakers tried to chant, but his tongue split mid-word. He crumpled. The others kept going, their voices raw. The scar on my arm glowed in perfect time, like it was conducting the ritual. I sprinted for the guard office. But every hallway led me back to Block D. 5 tries. 10. 20. No matter what I did, I always ended at the same cell, the one with the door I'd seen in my dream. The scar hummed with anticipation. The door pulsed like a vein. The wall above the cell split open, and something shoved from the other side. Not a head this time. Not a wing. A claw. 3 talons, black as obsidian, sharp enough to cut the air itself. It raked once, sparks spraying. The caretakers wailed. The chapel bells rang even though no one touched them. Gale pulled me back, but the claw didn't withdraw. It was inside. Then everything broke. 1 second, I was staring at the claw. The next daylight. I was outside, standing by the prison gates. My shift over. Except my scar still glowed. And when I checked my watch, it was the same time as when the claw broke through. No hours had passed. Just one loop, sealed shut. The reformatory isn't just falling apart. It's folding. Repeating. Melting. And Drogon isn't trapped anymore. He's practicing. Testing how much of reality he can bend before the cage breaks for good. And my scar, it likes the game. They dragged me into the chapel just after midnight. Candles smoked against the peeling walls. The stained glass shook with every breath of wind, though the air outside was still. The caretakers stood in a circle. Gale at my side. One of them spoke. He is no longer a guard. He is the crack. Kill him, and Drogon loses his door. Another shook their head. No. He is the only one learning. The rules speak through him. Without him, we are blind. The circle broke into shouts. For the first time since I'd met them, they weren't united. One caretaker stepped forward, jabbing a finger at my scar. You've already answered him, haven't you? We hear it in your voice. We see it in your eyes. I wanted to deny it. To scream. But the scar flared, and my mouth almost formed the word yes. Gale grabbed my hand under the table, hard enough to hurt, grounding me back in silence. The argument turned physical. One slammed another against the altar. A torch fell, setting the carpet smoldering. Their chants collided, words warping the air. The candles flared blue, shadows twisting like serpents. And above us, the ceiling groaned. The scar pulsed in rhythm with the violence, feeding on it. The fight stopped when the floor cracked open. Heat poured through the fissure. The smell of ash and scales filled the chapel. A voice, low but heavy enough to rattle the glass. Choose. It wasn't clear if Drogon was speaking to them or to me. Half of them turned on me instantly, chanting words of binding, ropes in hand. The other half blocked their path, torches raised like weapons. You kill him, we all burn, one shouted. You keep him alive, we all burn slower, came the reply. The scar seared my arm, writing fresh letters in blood-red heat. Rule 9. Survive their judgment. Gale's stand. She pulled me to the side door as the brawl erupted. Fists, fire, words of power. The chapel shook under their fury. Don't look back, she said, shoving me into the corridor. They'll tear themselves apart. And when they do, you'll still be standing. But Gale. I chose my side already. Go. The door slammed behind me. The chanting and screams echoed down the hall, louder than the storms outside. For the first time, I realized Drogon didn't need to fight us. We were doing it for him. And the scar on my arm pulsed like it was laughing. When I stumbled from the chapel into the east corridor, everything went silent. No shouts. No chants. No storm rattling the windows. The quiet pressed like a hand over my mouth. That was when I knew Drogon wasn't behind the door anymore. He was in the halls with me. The fluorescence above flickered and stretched, their glow bending like it was being pulled into the walls. Paint curled back from the plaster, revealing murals underneath scales, wings, talons scratched into stone like they'd always been there. The air tasted of copper. And the scar on my arm wasn't pulsing anymore. It was dragging me forward. The words seared bright across my skin. Rule 9, survive their judgment. I finally understood it wasn't about the caretakers. It was about him. Drogon had come to judge me directly. Every other rule had been rehearsal. I reached the junction where C-block met the solitary wing. The hallway stretched like rubber, doors elongating into arches. Inside each barred cell, shadows writhed prisoners I knew had died decades ago. They whispered my name in unison. Then stopped. Then, all at once, screamed. Guilty. The scar blistered like fresh fire. I turned and he was there. Not fully formed, not yet. But his shape filled the corridor like smoke and molten metal. Wings scraping the ceiling. Eyes like two eclipses. Every step cracked the tiles, the cracks glowing red. And still he followed rules. He waited for me to react. The voice came without mouth or breath. Survival is submission. Defiance is death. Choose. Behind him, the walls folded into an endless pit of fire. Behind me, the hallway sealed shut, bricks slamming into place. No escape. Only choice. I remembered what Gale said before pushing me out, they'll tear themselves apart. You'll still be standing. I wasn't supposed to fight him with strength. Only with the very rules he'd shackled me in. So I whispered Rule 1. Then Rule 2. Then 3. Each word glowed in the air like chains of light, snapping around him. Drogon roared, the sound peeling paint from the walls, but he did not break them. The rules were his nature. And now, they were mine. The scar spat blood as I recited. The heat nearly blinded me. But the chains held long enough for a crack to split the corridor wall, spilling moonlight through. I dove through it, collapsing into the prison yard outside. The door sealed behind me. And in the silence, I realized I hadn't won. I'd only been granted one more night. Drogon had walked the halls, and I had survived. But now the rules weren't just guidelines. They were weapons. And every weapon demands to be used. The Reformatory groaned as if stone could breathe. I had just crawled back in from the prison yard, thinking the worst was over, when the floor pitched like the deck of a ship. The walls swelled outward, then contracted. And that's when I realized that the entire prison was breathing. The bars along B block bent inward, rib-like. Rust peeled away to show bone, white and slick, sprouting from steel. The chandeliers of the east wing dropped, twisting into hooked talons. And the murals that had haunted me earlier? They weren't paintings anymore. They were scales, pressing out of plaster, cracking through with every pulse. The reformatory was no longer a building. It was Drogon's ribcage. We were trapped inside his body. Every hallway shook with a low, steady thump. A heartbeat, echoing through stone and marrow. It quickened whenever I hesitated. Slowed when I recited the rules. I tested it whispering Rule 4. The beat stuttered. And that's when I knew, I was moving through his organs. And the rules were my map. I wasn't alone. From the far end of the corridor, Gale stumbled into view, blood down her cheek. Behind her, 2 caretakers limped, the ones who had defended me. They looked ragged. One of them missing fingers. Both clutching torches that sputtered against the damp air. The others, Gale's voice broke. They didn't make it. Or maybe they were already part of Drogon's new flesh. We pushed forward, deeper into the prison. Doors opened into gaping throats lined with stone teeth. Stairwells pulsed like esophagi, swallowing the light as we descended. Every step closer to the central hall felt like being pulled down a throat. And in the distance, the roar of fire, not like a furnace anymore, but a lung-exhaling flame. We reached it, the chapel again, now warped beyond recognition. The pews melted into cartilage. The altar fused into bone. Above us, the ceiling cracked open into a massive, burning eye. And in the center a heart, suspended in chains of fire, beating slow and heavy. Each beat sent waves of heat and sound that nearly knocked me down. This was Drogon's core. His prison heart. The scar seared hotter than it ever had. New words bubbled through blood. Rule 10. Cut the heart, or be consumed. No one had mentioned a 10th rule. But Drogon himself had written it. Which meant this was the final judgment. The caretakers stared at me. Gale whispered, "It has to be you." And I knew she was right. The rules had been guiding me here from the start. But cutting the heart might kill Drogon, or it might kill all of us still breathing inside him. And I only had one chance to swing. The caretakers circled me, chanting with hoarse throats. Gale pressed something cold into my hand, a shard of rebar sharpened like a blade. The heart swung above us in its cage of chains, each beat shaking bone dust from the rafters. I raised the blade, scar glowing like molten wire, and drove it down. Metal met flesh. And Drogon screamed. The heart didn't split. The rule did. The scar split open, letters unraveling into smoke. The 10 rules I'd lived by burned into me, drilled into me, followed to the letter scattered like ash. The chains around the heart cracked. The heart swelled, doubling in size. And Drogon's voice filled every vein of the reformatory. You think to bind me with law? I am the law. The chapel walls peeled back like skin. Beyond them was no Ohio night, only endless black, studded with fire. Not stars. Scales. We weren't in Mansfield anymore. We were inside Drogon entire. The reformatory was just his mask, stripped away. And now he wasn't playing by rules. Rule 2 whispered in my ear, never answer the voices at night. But another voice, my own, doubled and hollow, urged, answer now, and you live. Rule 4 burned in my skin, never lock a cell with someone inside. Yet Gale's torchlight revealed caretakers shoving each other into bone cages, surviving by breaking what had once saved them. The rules weren't laws anymore. They were traps. And Drogon was laughing through every word. Gale's anchor. She grabbed my wrist, dragging me from the heart as the floor liquefied into fire. "Don't listen," she hissed. "Not anymore. They're his now. He's rewriting them. But without the rules. Then we make our own." Her eyes burned brighter than the torches. And for the first time, I realized Gale wasn't afraid. She was ready to fight. The reformatory folded inward, ribcage snapping shut around us. Above, the burning eye widened into a full head, snout stretching down. Teeth bigger than cells, breath like molten iron. He filled the sky and the floor at once, infinite and intimate. And still he waited. Like he wanted me to decide how the story ended. The letters etched into my arm bled into one last phrase. Rule 0, if you survive, you write the law. I staggered, almost laughing, because it wasn't his command. It was mine. The scar wasn't a leash. It was a pen. The reformatory trembled, ready to collapse into nothing. Drogon loomed, unbound, eternal. And I realized the last episode wouldn't be about following the rules. It would be about breaking them to make new ones. The world was no longer Ohio. The reformatory folded in on itself, ribs groaning, cells snapping into bone. The caretakers screamed as they were swallowed by fissures of fire. Gale held me upright as the scar burned like a brand fresh from the forge. Above us Drogon, entire. Wings that bent the horizon. A maw that could swallow the chapel, the yard, the city whole. His voice cracked stone. You have cut. You have broken. You have no law left to follow. Gale's last push. She shoved the rebar blade back into my hand. Then right one, she hissed. Her hair whipped in the heat, her eyes watering but steady. You've been living by his rules this whole time. Make him live by yours. The scar split to the bone, blood spilling in patterns I didn't understand, letters, curling, ancient. But I spoke them anyway. Not his rules. Not the ones branded into me. My rules. 1. You do not own this place. 2. You do not own these people. 3. You do not own me. Each word burned like a chain wrapping around Drogon's wings. He roared, the fire inside his throat flickering. For the first time he staggered. The air stilled. Drogon's head lowered, eyes eclipsing the sky. Law is not yours to give. Law is born of blood, of scale, of judgment. My voice broke, but I forced the words out. Then judge me. Judge me by mine. If I stand, your fire dims. If I fall, you burn it brighter. But you don't get both. Gale whispered, you're binding him with choice. The ground cracked open beneath my feet. Fire licked at my boots. The scar boiled, my vision blurring. He pressed down, weight of ages, scales grinding against reality itself. And still I repeated. You do not own me. You do not own me. You do not own me. The words dug deeper than iron. Chains, not his, but mine, wrapped around his throat. The roar cut off into silence. The fire dimmed, shrinking back into the walls. The ribs of the reformatory loosened. Stone reformed, solid, dead again. Drogon's head lowered until his eye was level with me, black, infinite, but watching. Not defeated. Not gone. But bound. Bound by a rule I had written. When I looked at my arm, the letters were gone. All but one word carved in deep, healed into scar tissue already. Mine. I collapsed on the chapel steps. Gale sat beside me, her torch sputtering out. The caretakers, those left alive, knelt in silence, no longer chanting, no longer sure. For the first time, the reformatory was quiet. Not safe. Never safe. But quiet. I don't know if I won. Drogon isn't gone. He never will be. But the rules aren't his anymore. They're mine. And if anyone reading this takes one thing from me, let it be this. You can survive by following their rules. But you only live when you make your own. I woke up in my own bed. No chapel. No ribs. No chains. Just sunlight cutting through my cheap curtains. For a second, I thought I had dreamed everything. Until I looked at my arm. The scar was gone. But the word mine was still there, raised like stone beneath the skin. First fracture. The phone rang. Not my cell. My landline, which hadn't rung in months. When I answered, a voice whispered, "Rule 2 is broken in Chillicothe." Click. Silence. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew where Chillicothe was another prison, long closed, south of Mansfield. The rules had spread. Gail knocked on my door an hour later, eyes bloodshot, jacket torn. She didn't bother with a greeting. "You felt it, didn't you?" I nodded. She tossed a folder onto my table, photos of Chillicothe Correctional. The cells warped, the halls dripping black tar. It looked just like Mansfield before Drogon revealed himself. Only worse. That night, we met the surviving caretakers. Half of them bowed their heads when they saw me, whispering, "Rule 0, like a prayer." The others glared, hands on knives, saying I had replaced Drogon with something worse. Both sides were right. Because when I spoke, they listened. Not out of choice. Out of compulsion. The rules weren't burned into me anymore. They were burned out of me. And wherever I went, they followed. The prisons weren't just haunted anymore. They were listening. The prison looked dead from the road. Chain link rusted. Guard towers empty. Windows black. But as Gale and I walked the perimeter, we heard it whispers. Not carried by wind. Carried by walls. Every brick breathed. At Mansfield, Rule 2 had kept me alive, never answer the voices at night. Here, that rule had collapsed. People had answered. Inside the yard, I saw them, a half-dozen men, faces pale as wax, standing shoulder to shoulder. They weren't inmates. Too modern. Too clean. They were locals. Pulled in. And when they turned, mouths open too wide, voices spilling in perfect unison. We answered. Now we're part of the question. Inside the main block, the voices multiplied. Each cell dripped with sound, thick as tar. Words that weren't words, questions without answers. Do you still remember your mother's face? Would you kill to leave? If I told you you were guilty, would you argue? The walls weren't haunted. They were hungry. Gale's test. One voice hissed her name. She froze. I grabbed her arm, but she whispered back before I could stop her. And her reflection appeared in the cell door window, not matching her movements, not matching her words. The reflection grinned. "Don't let it out," I hissed. She tore her gaze away, shivering. "I felt it trying to wear me," she whispered. "Like a coat." From the shadows, a figure stepped out, one of the caretakers who had doubted me. His eyes were black, throat raw from speaking too much. "They don't want to hurt you," he rasped. "They just want a body. And if you give them one, they'll give you answers." He reached toward me. I shoved him back. His skin cracked like pottery, falling away to reveal nothing but a voice underneath. The building swallowed him whole. My arm flared again. Not with old rules. With something new. Words surfaced, faint but sharp. Rule 2, revised: speak only when you choose the silence that follows. I whispered it aloud. And for the first time, the voices stopped. The men in the yard froze. The walls ceased their murmuring. Chillicothe held its breath. The rule wasn't Drogon's anymore. It was mine. But the silence that followed felt heavier than the whispers ever did. Because now the prison wasn't asking questions. It was waiting for answers. Chillicothe held its breath. No voices. No whispers. Just a silence so heavy my chest locked up. Gale pressed her hands over her ears. It feels loud, she gasped. Too loud. She was right. The silence wasn't absence. It was presence. Like something waiting in the dark corners, smiling. We heard it then, a scrape. Not footsteps. Not chains. Something sliding along concrete, gnawing, like a dog on bone. A guard tower collapsed inward. The men in the yard screamed, their voices stolen halfway out of their throats, cut short as if the silence chewed them mid-word. Nothing remained but red marks on the snow. The silence was eating sound. I tried whispering a simple test. Hello. The air snapped it up. But my scar pulsed, forcing me to speak again, louder this time. Hello. The word hung, untouched. That's when I understood. The silence only ate sounds you didn't choose. Stray words. Reflex answers. Nervous muttering. But chosen words carried weight. Chosen words resisted. Gale's confession. We holed up in the administration wing. Old desks, broken clocks, rotted books. Gale leaned close, eyes rimmed red. Evan, she whispered, careful, deliberate, I think Drogon wanted us here. I asked why. She pointed at the scar on my arm, still glowing faintly. Because you're not just following his rules anymore. You're writing them. Her voice cracked. And what happens when the silence realizes you're not afraid of it? The floor split. Not a collapse, a seam opening, neat and surgical. From it came no figure, no monster, no face. Just a shape like breath turned solid. A silence with teeth. Rows and rows of them, made of absence. It lunged, trying to bite Gale's scream. But she didn't scream. She clenched her jaw shut, fists tight, waiting for me. I spoke. Not to it. To the building. The silence has teeth, I said, slowly, deliberately. But it cannot bite what is chosen. The words burned out of me, searing my throat, carved into stone walls like fire. And the silence shrank back. Not defeated. But watching. Waiting for another mistake. We left the prison before sunrise. No more voices. No more silence. Just the echo of my words, still etched into stone, pulsing faintly like another scar. Gale wouldn't look at me the whole drive home. Because she knew. And I knew. We weren't escaping Drogon. We were becoming him. We made it 3 miles down Route 545 before Gale pulled over. Her knuckles were white against the steering wheel. You can't say things like that, she said, voice trembling. Like what? Like you did back there. Like you were writing commandments. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. My throat was raw, blistered inside, like my words had been dragged across coals. She was right. It hadn't been speaking. It had been inscribing. Mansfield at dawn looked normal. Grocery trucks. Coffee steam in cafe windows. But when we passed the courthouse square, every bird on the wire turned its head the same way toward me. Not Gale. Not the car. Me. And none of them sang. Back at my apartment, I dug out the journal I'd stolen weeks ago, the one from the warden's desk. Most of it was payroll, shift notes, supplies. But tucked at the back was a list. Not numbered rules, but phrases. Each written like a sentence in stone. The dead do not answer unless you ask with both eyes closed. Never count the footsteps in the east wing. If silence comes, speak only with intent. The last one made my hands shake. If silence comes. They'd known. At dusk, someone knocked. Not Gail, she was still too shaken. It was a kid. Couldn't have been more than 16. Eyes dark-ringed, skin pale, wearing a hoodie too thin for the weather. He held out a notebook. Pages torn, smudged, words scrawled sideways. "You're the one making rules now," he said flat. "How do you know that?" He pointed at my arm, the scar, still glowing faint under the sleeve. "Because the walls at Chillicothe whispered your words last night. And the walls here remembered them too." I flipped his notebook. Inside, drawings of Drogon, the cage, teeth made of silence. But also something new. A tower, half built of brick, half of shadow. And under it, scrawled in the kid's shaky hand. "What you write, it stays. What stays, it spreads." I slammed the book shut. I thought the silence had been defeated in that moment when I spoke. But it hadn't. It had learned. Now every prison wall, every reformatory brick, every concrete slab in this state was carrying my words forward. My rules weren't just mine anymore. They were law. Gail's warning. When Gail finally came back, I showed her. She didn't speak at first. Just pressed her hands against her temples, pacing. Finally she said, "You think Drogon wanted worship? He didn't. He wanted infrastructure." I frowned. She jabbed her finger toward the notebook. "He's using you to scale. Every prison, every cage, every silence pocket, they're running your words like programs. And sooner or later, one of your mistakes becomes permanent." That night I couldn't sleep. The scar pulsed. The walls in my apartment creaked, not like wood, but like voices trying to form vowels. And I realized Gail was wrong in one way. It wasn't infrastructure Drogon wanted. It was a mouth. And I had just given him mine. It was midnight when the phone rang. Not my cell. The landline in the apartment. A phone I hadn't even bothered to hook up. I picked it up anyway. The voice was muffled, strangled, but urgent. "They're saying your words." Click. Silence. Next day, Gail drove me out to the old Franklin County workhouse. Shut down for years, but people said kids broke in all the time. When we got there, the chain link was cut. Inside, graffiti on the walls, gang tags, names, crude jokes. But underneath, layered like fresh mortar, were my sentences. Not written in paint. Pressed into the concrete like they'd always been there. We weren't alone. Half a dozen squatters clustered in the cell block, shivering around a barrel fire. One of them stood when he saw me. "You're him," he said. "The rule man." Before I could argue, he snapped his fingers at another kid. "Show him." The kid walked into the hall, clapped his hands twice. A shadow slid from the ceiling, teeth glinting in the dark. The boy shouted, slow and deliberate, "If silence comes, speak only with intent." The shadow recoiled, evaporated. My blood went cold. They were using my words like spells. Back outside, Gail paced, frantic. "This is bad, Evan. It means you don't just write rules. You enforce them. You're building a system, whether you like it or not." I stared back at the workhouse, the squatters cheering inside. They thought I was saving them. But the scar on my arm burned. And I knew better. The walls weren't following me. They were following Drogon. I was just the mouthpiece. That night I tried an experiment. In my apartment, I whispered a line I'd never seen in the warden's ledger. "No shadow shall cross the doorway if the threshold is named." I wrote it down. Then waited. Hours later, as the silence crept under my door, the air trembled and stopped. Couldn't pass. The threshold glowed faintly, like the scar. My throat hurt worse than ever. And I realized I hadn't beaten anything. I just taught it how to obey. I didn't sleep. Every wall in the city felt alive. Breathing. Remembering. And the thought that wouldn't leave me. If I could write new rules, so could Drogon. And the next time silence came, it wouldn't be silence at all. It would be his voice. It was a stupid line. A test. I wrote it down in the margin of the warden's ledger at 3 a.m., half delirious from lack of sleep. No shadow may follow me if I do not turn around. It felt safe enough. Just a thought scribbled in ink. But when I shut the book, I heard footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Behind me. And my scar burned so hot I dropped the pen. At first, it worked. I walked through my apartment, out into the hall, down 3 flights of stairs. Never turned around. The footsteps followed but didn't touch me. I thought maybe I'd beaten it again. Until Gail called. Her voice cracked on the phone, "Evan, it's in my house. It's standing behind me. I can't move." That's when I realized the rule hadn't protected me. It had displaced the shadow. Bound it to anyone who did turn around. The silence had shifted the curse sideways. And Gail had been the first one to look back. I drove to her place. Inside, the air was thick, humming. She was standing frozen in the kitchen, eyes wide, staring at something just behind her shoulder. I couldn't see it. Didn't have to. The walls vibrated with its teeth. "Don't look at it," I said, steady, deliberate. She gasped, "I can't move." So I did the only thing I could. I spoke a counterline. What follows one must follow both, until the path is broken. My throat ripped raw. Her body jerked like a puppet cut from strings. And then the air went still. Later, she asked me what that meant. "What path did you break, Evan?" I didn't answer. Because I knew. The shadow hadn't left. It had just bound itself to both of us now. Everywhere we went, we'd feel it breathing down our necks. So long as neither of us turned around, it wouldn't bite. But the instant one of us did, the other would pay. That night, I sat awake in the dark. And I realized something horrible. The rules weren't Drogon's cage anymore. They were mine. Every word I wrote wasn't just protection. It was infrastructure. And I had no idea how many bad bricks I'd already laid. After the mistake, Gail wouldn't let me out of her sight. "Every step you take, I take," she said. I wanted to argue, but she was right. The rule I'd written had bound us together, one shadow split across 2 backs. If either of us looked, the other would pay. So we learned to move in sync. Eating side by side. Driving without mirrors. Sleeping in the same room, always facing forward. The silence loved it. I could feel it pulsing in the air, amused, waiting. We had to shop. Couldn't stay locked up forever. At Kroger, the aisles felt like mazes. People brushed past, reaching, turning, bumping carts. Each time someone crossed behind me, my whole body tensed. The scar glowed. And Gail whispered, slow and deliberate, "Don't look." We made it to checkout. But the bag boy leaned in, curious. "Hey, man, why are you two walking like?" He stopped. Froze. Because his eyes flicked behind us. And whatever he saw made his lips tremble. He dropped the bags and bolted. That night, the walls weren't still. They moved. Not crumbling or cracking, shifting, subtly. The hallway stretched longer. The doors didn't line up. It was making sure there was always space behind us. Somewhere the shadow could stand. In the dark, Gale whispered, careful, chosen words. I think Drogon's testing you. Every rule you write, every word you bind, he's watching to see if you learn his language. Her hand found mine. And Evan, I think you're learning too fast. I didn't answer. Because she was right. The scar wasn't just a mark anymore. It was a mouth. And sometimes, I didn't know if the words I spoke were mine. 3 days later, we snapped. Argued over nothing: dishes, groceries, exhaustion. I raised my voice. She spun toward me. We both froze. Because she had almost turned. Almost looked behind her. Her lip trembled. I can't live like this, she said. The silence leaned closer. Waiting. Hungry. That night, I wrote one line in the ledger. I didn't test it yet. Didn't say it aloud. Just carved it in ink. What is bound may be unbound, but only if the shadow chooses. I shut the book. And the walls laughed. Low. Deep. Endless. Because Drogon knew. I'd just given the shadow a voice of its own. Gale asked what I wrote. I told her nothing. But I lied. Because now the shadow wasn't just following us. It was deciding. And sooner or later, it would speak. It happened at 4:13 a.m. I was lying awake, Gale breathing steady beside me. The scar pulsed, hot, rhythmic. And then, from the space behind us, a voice. Not deep. Not high. Not human. Just there. One word, low and heavy as stone. Stay. I couldn't move. Neither could Gale. Our muscles locked, skin prickling. The shadow had spoken. And because of the rule I'd written, it meant it had chosen. It was no longer bound. It was binding us. The next morning, Gale tried to leave the apartment. She stepped toward the door. The scar on my arm flared like fire, and her whole body jerked back as if yanked by chains. She gasped, clutching her chest. We can't, she whispered. It won't let us. I didn't need to check. The shadow had chosen its word. Stay wasn't just instruction. It was law. I opened the warden's ledger, desperate. Flipped past the blank pages. They weren't blank anymore. New rules had appeared, scrawled in my own handwriting, except I hadn't written them. The walls decide what the body obeys. The mouth that speaks may not be the one that chooses. Stay. The last word repeated for 20 pages straight. That night, Gale lost it. Screamed, sobbed, pounded on the walls. I can't live like this. I won't be your prisoner. Her voice echoed, distorted, bouncing wrong in the apartment. And the shadow whispered back, soft and mocking. Stay. Her body folded, trembling, forced down to the floor. I caught her before she cracked her head. And I knew it wasn't just commanding. It was conditioning. I sat cross-legged in the middle of the room, scar burning, throat raw. And I asked it not aloud, but inside. What do you want? The air shifted. Cold, sharp, teeth in the silence. And the answer came. Mouth. It wanted my voice. All of it. That night, I held Gale as she cried herself to sleep. And I stared at the wall, wondering how long I could keep my mouth mine. Because every time the shadow spoke, the scar throbbed in agreement. And deep down, I couldn't tell anymore. Was I teaching the shadow? Or was it teaching me? It started with the apartment walls. First, the plaster bubbled. Then the seams cracked. By dawn, the drywall folded inward like paper, opening corridors where none had been. I knew the pattern: the reformatory. The building wasn't mine anymore. It was his. Gail's plea. She grabbed my arm, eyes wild. "We have to run." But the scar burned deep, and I felt the rule binding me like a chain. We couldn't leave. Not until the shadow spoke again. And it hadn't. We walked the hallways as they twisted, stretched, reshaped. Every turn brought us deeper into a place I knew too well. Cell doors slammed open on their own. Rust creaked. The stink of mildew and stone rose thick. By the time we reached the main corridor, I knew we were back inside the reformatory. But this time, it had come to us. In the center of the block, the air warped. The silence folded into itself, black and heavy. And Drogon stepped through. Not as smoke, not as whispers. But as a body. Tall. Thin. Too many joints in its arms. Its head a cage, ribs of iron bent into the shape of a skull. Inside, flickering my words, burned into light. Every rule I had ever spoken, etched across its bones. It didn't roar. Didn't threaten. It only spoke, voice like every wall at once. Mouth. You will speak for me. I shook, throat raw. I won't. The cage head tilted, iron bars groaning. You already do. And I realized it wasn't lying. Every rule that had bound the silence, every curse, every command, they hadn't been mine. They'd been his drafts, running through me. Gale stepped forward, fists trembling. You don't own him. The shadow turned. The walls bent. And her body buckled, pulled toward the floor. Stay, it whispered. She screamed, choking, her limbs jerking like wires pulled taut. I lunged, grabbed her hand. And shouted without thinking. Break. The word hit the air like glass cracking. The scar split, bleeding. The walls shrieked, fissures ripping through concrete. For the first time, Drogon staggered. But the light in its cage head flared, words writhing across its bars. You cannot unwrite me. The reformatory around us shook, sealing dust raining. Gale gasped against my shoulder, barely conscious. And I knew we had one chance left. Not to fight Drogon. Not to bind him. But to say the right final word. Because if I didn't, he wouldn't just live in my scar. He'd live in every wall in Ohio. The reformatory roared around us. Stone cracked, beams split, corridors folded in on themselves like ribs snapping inward. Gale clung to me, eyes bloodshot, barely able to breathe. And Drogon towered above, cage head glowing with every sentence I had ever written. Each word flickered like flame on its bars. And its voice pressed into me from every angle. Speak. Finish what I began. The scars seared like molten iron. I understood then. The silence had never been void. It had always been hunger. And my words had been its food. But hunger can starve. If I gave it nothing, no rules, no spells, no commands, it couldn't grow. It could only wither. Gale's whisper. Her lips brushed my ear, trembling, urgent. Don't give it what it wants. Don't give it anything. But that wasn't enough. The reformatory was already cracking into the city, spilling corridors out into Mansfield like veins. I had to close it. And silence alone wouldn't seal the cage. It needed one last word. I stood. Blood dripping from my scar. My throat raw. And I chose the only word that mattered. End. The moment it left my lips, the air detonated. Light surged through the halls, every brick vibrating. The rules in Drogon's cage head shattered, fragments of sentences scattering like broken glass. It screamed, a sound not made for ears, metal twisting, walls howling. And then the reformatory folded inward. Every corridor collapsed, every door slammed, every cell sealed. Until it was gone. Nothing left but my apartment. Silent. Still. Gale lay against the wall, gasping. Alive. The scar on my arm had split open, but instead of burning, it was cooling. The glow was gone. Just flesh now. Just a wound. She looked at me, tears streaking. Is it over? I wanted to say yes. But I couldn't. Because I still heard it. Not loud. Not commanding. Just faint. A whisper in the walls. Repeating the last word. End. 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 So here I am. Writing this down, the last I'll ever put in words. Because I know now every sentence I write isn't mine. It's a seed. And seeds grow. If you're reading this, if the walls around you are breathing while you do, stop. Put it away. Don't repeat it. Don't let it spread. Because the reformatory isn't gone. It's waiting. And if you speak, even once, it will have a mouth again. The scar healed crooked. Not gone, just quieter. I moved out of Mansfield 3 weeks later. Found a cheap apartment down in Kentucky. Different air, different brick, different shadows. But silence doesn't change zip codes. At night, I still feel the reformatory's stone pressing down, even though it's 2 states away. Gale won't answer my calls anymore. I don't blame her. She got free. She doesn't want to be dragged back in. I promised myself I wouldn't write again. Not one word. But the problem with silence? It has edges. You press against them too long, you cut yourself. And tonight, I woke up to something new. Not the old voice. Not Drogon. This was different. A rhythm. Like wings. Like pages turning. And on the wall above my bed, in the faint wash of moonlight, I swear the plaster rippled words forming and unforming before I could catch them. One stuck. Burned in, letters jagged like scars. Seed. If this is how it spreads, then maybe I didn't end it. Maybe I just planted it. And maybe the next one won't wait for prisons. Maybe it'll bloom anywhere there's a story. Anywhere there's a voice. Anywhere there's someone like you, reading this.